Hello, my wonderful listeners. This is Fax 5. I'm doing something that I didn't anticipate I would do. Well, at least not today. So, I originally had a plan for the next handful of videos that I'm going to produce and release. However, on last Thursday, 3/17/22, I was brought the attention of what I can only describe as a beautiful monstrosity. One of the January 6th defendants, Brandon Fellows, decided to, for some reason, file a document 78-1 pro se. So he didn't have a lawyer. He did this himself and officially submitted it to a judge. You will see in the description the link to the actual court filing. And keep in mind, everything that I'm going to be reading and putting on screen, because there are so many typos, so much terrible grammar, that all this has officially been submitted to a federal judge. In fact, I forget the judge's name off the top of my head, but I did check, and he is a Trump-appointed judge, which makes things even more interesting. Said judge, his name is referenced at some point in this. I've already read through this thing a few times, and I've had to make notes and look up a lot of stuff to counter the various false factual claims this guy makes. Reading this, it just broke my mind. It was so difficult to get through. Real slog. And yet, it really delves into the Neo-Tillmanesque mindset, the perpetual state of persecution and victimhood that these Trumpists hoist upon themselves. This goes on for 32 freaking pages. Okay. Motion respectfully asking the judge to grant my relief, despite arguments from the government, / to enforce the Constitution, / there are actual slashes in this, stop the constitutional abuse towards us January 6th defendants in the D.C. Correctional Facility, and any others being abused unconstitutionally as well in the jail. Point 1. Goal, I'd like you to give us the triple C's and HR double V's and help fix and enforce the jail's, it says jails, no apostrophe, grievance process. I need to have some apple cider. That's some good cider. Could you imagine, any actual lawyer making a request like, yo, judge, give us some of that. I need some of that triple C's and the HR double V's. I mean, could you imagine actually going to law school and having to read this? Point number 2, requests to be considered. Church, clergy, classrooms, so I guess that's the triple C's, haircuts, recreations, visitations, and video calls, and that's the HR double V's. I'll separately address papers, stamps, and pens in a separate, shorter memorandum. These are what everyone else gets aside from us January 6th defendants in the pod. Yeah, he uses pod a lot as slang for jail. Is this supposed to be like a reference to the whole, eat the bugs and live in the pod meme? I really don't know. Even the vaccinated do not get these services except haircuts. Section 1. Judge, I respectfully remind you that you took an oath to the Constitution and to protect it. Took an oath to the Constitution and to protect it. Since October 2021, I've written about these abuses, though thanks to my radical leftist counsel as well as this jail, you didn't see it until late December 1st, 2021. Okay. I think I know why he's filing this pro se if he seems to legitimately believe, excuse me, that his counsel, that his lawyers are leftists. You know, judging by this guy's attitude, I don't think the best lawyer in the world can save him. However, our inhumane and cruel treatment has been known to the nation and many other countries long before that. You personally stood up for others regarding them missing one Sunday of church and gave them injunctive relief upon request, all while throwing away the government's arguments using COVID as an excuse to stop the churches. We January 6th defendants are at 58 and counting as of 2/2022, weeks later, and still begging month after month, not just for church, but all the other services that have been discriminatorily denied us. Okay, you know what? Like, just taking this on its own, it seems like a reasonable request. He's, like, assuming he's being accurate and not bullshitting. If this is true, then okay, that is a reasonable thing to ask a judge. Okay? There are a handful of reasonable things in this. Very few. But I do feel obligated to point that out. I'm asking you to do what you rightly did before, in similar and less extreme cases, grant us the relief we need and continue to defend the Constitution as you have in the past. Last time in court, I literally begged you to give our rights that were unjustifiably stolen from us, as I explained, with tears in my eyes and crackling voice, how these abuses were mentally, physically, and emotionally crippling us. I'll just assume, assuming he's being accurate. That is sad. I do firmly believe that everybody deserves civil rights, even scoundrels and scum. There are plenty worse people than him. And I would say even those worse people deserve civil rights as well. But the way this is written, this is an official legal filing document, whatever the kids are calling it, given to a judge. This isn't even like a lawyer describing how his client is acting. No, he's writing this himself. Okay. I am glad that not even 1 week later, on Valentine's Day, you responded to my in-person pleas. I never would have guessed that the best letter I ever received on Valentine's Day would come from my judge in a criminal case involving a supposed insurrection at the Capitol of the United States. I just gotta say, the implication here is that this guy has never had a love life at all. I mean, it's not explicitly stated, but it is kind of implied. However, things have been anything but ordinary for me since January 6th, 2021. What did you expect? No, seriously. Did you expect things to be ordinary after you took part in the January 6th? Oh my God. You're like, things have never been the same ever since I took part in a riot at the Capitol and in an attempt to overthrow the 2020 presidential election. I wonder why that is. Yeah, why do you think that is? As I shared with you, the Washingtonian in December 2021 called us, quote, this city's most hated group. And I need to point out, he doesn't have city apostrophe S. He has the plural of cities, CITIES. This guy needs a fucking editor. However, you could just walk down the street or turn on the TV, or turn the TV on to realize that. I then pointed out to you that this isn't the first time a Democrat-majority city continually deprived its most hated group of its constitutional and God-given rights. So too did the hateful racist Democrats in 1950 Montgomery, Alabama, against its African-American population. Seriously. It gets worse. You smiled when I mentioned this, and although I don't know why, perhaps it's because, like most, I have debated both inside and outside of this jail, you don't see it as similar or correlated. This, too, is something most of the non-January 6th defendants, and even some of us in jail, felt and said to me when I debated them. Okay, truth be told, if you legitimately believe that you're innocent, then I can at least understand why you would think that the system is specifically out to get you. Heck, maybe you are innocent, and it can then feel as if the system is out to get you. The system's got a lot of issues going for it. But at the same time, this guy is just incapable of acknowledging that, even incapable of acknowledging his own faults. He's just completely and utterly convinced that he is a victim on par with the activists of the civil rights movement. Seriously, the civil rights activists were... How do I best describe it? Well, basically, they were attacked by the people in power continually. The entire police, the entire state apparatuses of multiple states were out to get them. And there was hundreds of years of, or at least 100 years of precedent regarding oppressive and unjust Jim Crow laws. This is a brat. Like, this guy's just a brat who is mad that he got caught and doesn't want to face any consequences for his actions. However, if this is the case, perhaps like many of them, your mind will be changed when doing some comparisons. I will share that some people remarked that they were going to stab me for suggesting these had similarities, but despite their threats and the potential for injury, I took no fear in expressing the truth. So you're telling me that there are people in jail who are prone to violence? Wow. You know, like, this is mind-blowing. Who would have guessed that there are people currently in jail who are prone to bouts of violence? I mean, I don't think he deserves to get stabbed, but it's like what did he expect? Many in those pods' minds, it should be pods, there's no apostrophe, were changed. And I was using fucking passive tense. I hate passive tense. I understand by sending you this, I potentially will suffer either openly or in unknown ways, probably from the propaganda journalists. But again, I'm not afraid of sharing the truth. My hope is that, like many people I've debated in this jail and outside it, you will see I have good points and agree that what I said is correlated, relevant, he needs to put a comma here, there's no comma, and we'll proceed to act on it. I'd like to make this portion of my motion festive in light of Black History Month to show you how correlated our treatment really is, and, of course, concede on some clear differences. After all, not only does history tend to repeat itself, but few ever truly learn from it. Oh, I just noticed he misspelled truly. Okay, Black History Month is February. This was filed the 17th of March. But you know what? I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he composed this during Black History Month. It's not unreasonable to think that. Just gotta... It is Black History Month, and there's a lot to learn from it. I find these deprivations, discriminations, and unequal treatments to have strong correlations to what my black brothers suffered under the racist Democrats after the abolition of slavery, thanks to Republican Abraham Lincoln, up until the Brown v. Board of Education decision, which the Democrats also hated. Okay, first off, let's talk about the freaking grammar of this. So, he says... So first I want to say, I do understand what he's trying to say. What he's trying to say is that after the Civil War, or I should say rather, he was saying Abraham Lincoln, the Republican, freed the slaves, and after the Civil War, the Democrats oppressed African Americans until Brown v. Board of Education. However, the way this is worded, all right, first he says his black brothers suffered under the racist Democrats after the abolition of slavery, thanks to Republican Abraham Lincoln. The just the wording is so poor that it implies that Abraham Lincoln is the one who is directly or indirectly responsible for the oppression of African Americans in the postbellum South. But then, to make it even better, he says, up until the Brown v. Board of Education decision, that implies that discrimination just stopped after Brown versus the Board of Education. Like, what is this guy on? I do find our struggle in this democratic stronghold city similar to the black population '(S) struggle in the 1950s Democrat stronghold city of Montgomery, Alabama. Okay. Like, in the same sentence, he says Democratic stronghold city and then Democrat stronghold city. Be consistent, man. Like, okay, both can be grammatically correct, but at least show some consistency. It kind of helps with your writing. As you can tell, I enjoy editing stuff. And this guy needs a fucking editor. Yes, the same city with Rosa Parks' segregated bus incident. Okay, Rosa Parks' segregated bus... With Rosa Parks' segregated bus incident, the city many referred to as the cradle of the Confederacy. It even held the cradle of the Confederacy, comma, then quotations. This guy does quotations, comma, then... It even held the Confederate headquarters early on in the Civil War. Talk about a fucking whiner. I mean, but to top it off, like, the thing that I really need to point out is that he's in a federal jail dealing with a federal judge. Even though the District of Columbia is a deep blue stronghold, they really have little say over how the jail exactly works. Like, hypothetically speaking, I should say rather, DC, well, like many areas, there are, in a sense, two types of, well, a handful of different types of jails. So, like, say I'm in DC and I try to rob some guy's house, I would be dealt with by the regular DC police. It would be the DC Municipal Authority who would be responsible for catching me, incarcerating me, giving me my trial, etc., etc. And in that, even though I don't know exactly how DC selects its municipal authorities in these regards, I could at least understand the idea that it is the authority of the municipal government of the District of Columbia to deal with that. However, he'd committed a federal crime, is in a federal jail, awaiting a federal trial from a federal judge. Even though the employees might be DC residents, the actual people of the District of Columbia have actually quite literally no say in this, considering they don't have representatives and they don't have senators. That shit drives me up a wall. And you'll hear more about that later. With over 96% of people in D.C. voting for the pro-segregationist Joe Biden, who said, quote, "Without segregation, our schools would be a racial jungle," end quote. End quote, comma, open quote, "Obama was the first smart, eloquent black man I ever met," end quote, comma, "and whose lifelong friend and mentor was KKK member Robert Byrd, comma, this city sure is a modern-day Montgomery, Alabama." Okay. There's a lot of things you can make fun of regarding Robert Byrd. He was a senator from West Virginia, and it is true that in his youth he joined the KKK. However, I will have to say, despite my many issues with Robert Byrd, I do have to give him credit for, at a relatively young age, renouncing his ties to the Klan and demonstrating, at least something of a sympathy towards non-white residents of the U.S. And I'm paraphrasing him a little, but he even said something akin to like, I've apologized 1,000 times for what I did, and I'll apologize 1,000 more. My one regret is I can never undo what I did. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm defending Robert Byrd. I want to say this guy had a much better option. He could have easily gone with Strom Thurmond, who Joe Biden was, good friends with in the Senate. Strom Thurmond never really turned his back against his segregationist past. And Joe Biden even delivered a heartfelt speech at his eulogy. But no, this guy is just such a dunce. He takes the lesser option. With 96% of D.C. voting for Kamala Harris for vice president, despite her past as an attorney general, where she did not release black prisoners and continued forcing them to fight fires, parentheses slavery, and where she tried to deny a black man on death row his discovery, which ended up saving his life, comma, this city sure is a modern-day Montgomery. I mean, I just want to say that, so the District of Columbia does get 3 electoral votes for president. That's it. How do I word this properly? Basically, Biden was elected by the people of Delaware. Kamala Harris was elected by the people of California. And basically the sketchy stuff that Harris and Kamala did were for those states of Delaware and California. This is a bit different from Montgomery, Alabama, where the various locals elected or they didn't really have much of a choice, for lack of a better word. They elected Bull Connor and George Wallace and whatnot, and basically he was working on their behalf. Also, the vice president does nothing. Seriously, the vice president doesn't do much. Honestly, my dream job in life is to become vice president, because I basically get, I get my name in the history books. I don't have to do much. And, I get the full executive salary, and I get some nice prestige to go with it. I mean, I'm sure Dan Quayle's living a pretty good life right now. All right. With the Democrats in charge of this city for decades and the jail having only a 3% white population, this sure is a modern day... Oh wait, that's worse than 1950s Montgomery. Hooray for Democrats virtue signaling that they care about black people? Again, he's in a federal jail. Federal. It is. Now, I should point out that D.C., it has roughly a 50% black population. Hypothetically speaking, if D.C. were to become a state, it would be the blackest state in the USA. And I'm pretty sure that's also the reason why the GOP fights so tooth and nail against giving it statehood. What is Joe Biden's... Joe Biden apostrophe. He doesn't put an apostrophe. Joe Biden Cito, and his vice president... and his vice president has been saying she's black for almost a full 4 years now. Okay. I'm no expert in Kamala Harris. But, what the hell does that mean? She's been saying she's black for almost a full 4 years now. Like that, I really can't, I don't know what he's saying. They totally aren't pandering to a base, or bases, and fooling them like President Lyndon B. Johnson, a Democrat whose party friends were KKK supporters, said in order to get the minorities' apostrophe vote, and in parentheses, I'll keep them ends voting Democrat for the rest of their lives, end quote. Okay, no. This quote, no. I've actually tried looking into this quote myself. From what I could recall, the origin of this quote is like one of LBJ's what was it? Like one of his kind of staffers claimed he said that. Now, I'm not saying that the staffer is wrong or is lying, but to my knowledge, nobody else has been able to corroborate it. So I'm going to categorize it as rather unlikely. Like, not impossible, just highly unlikely. As for LBJ himself, this is LBJ we're talking about. That guy was crude as fuck. And, in fact, even his black staffers remarked about how he used the N-word more than anyone else they ever knew. Although, in fact, even one instance I specifically remember, I was reading a book about George Wallace a while back, and there was a transcript of a phone call where, Wallace was complaining, or between George Wallace and LBJ, and Wallace was complaining about, there are protesters always around the governor's mansion, and he finds them annoying, and LBJ's like, why don't you just let the end vote be done with it? Of course, I don't want to put it bluntly, there's a lot of pretty dark things LBJ almost certainly said at some point. At least pick something he actually did say. Heck, truth be told, he even said things that there are actually even better documentations of him saying roughly the opposite. Like when he said, I'm paraphrasing a little, I'm trying to remember what it is off the top of my head, is like, the way I see it, you tell the lowest black man he's better than you tell the lowest white man he's better than the best black man, and he won't notice when you pick his pockets. Hell, you give him someone to look down on, he'll empty his pockets for you. Similarly, upon signing the Civil Rights Act, he said, we've lost the South for a generation. Also, I have to look back at this. Joe Biden's favorite song is Despacito. Okay, I know what he's referencing. Like, back in the 2020 election at a presidential rally in Florida, Biden held up his phone and began playing Despacito into the microphone. I don't know if Biden ever said it was his favorite song. I think he just said he liked it, but I don't feel like checking that at the moment. I like, literally reading through this and having to look up so many worse things just kind of fried my brain. But at the same time, Joe Biden liking Despacito, is he trying to say that's cultural appropriation? What's he trying to do here? Slow Joe calls others racist towards black communities, and there's totally no such thing as reflecting gaslighting. He put gaslighting as 2 words. It should be 1 word for what he's describing. Or virtue signaling. Okay, I'm no lawyer, but I don't think you're ever supposed to be sarcastic when making one of these official filings to a judge. But I gotta love this guy's projection. Like, there's no such thing as reflecting. Yeah, you know what? This guy is incapable of reflecting. Joe Biden is here to help the black population, just like DC's Democrats have helped make this city a peaceful haven for all, as seen by tons of homeless people, murders, carjackings, shootings, riots, etc. Trust the political science. Yeah, all right, this guy does. I know he's spoofing, he's making fun of people saying trust the science. But let's be real here. This guy couldn't sit through an intro to political science video on YouTube. Seriously, though, just like Joe Biden, no apostrophe, Joe Biden's biggest targets have changed, outwardly at least, so too have the targets for the Democrat Party and its members. You know, it's supposed to be Democratic Party, like if you want to be technical. 9 times out of 10, when somebody says Democrat Party, they're generally a partisan individual acting in bad faith. The other 1/10 is just someone who gets confused or gets tongue-tied. They ruined black people's lives. Oh, he actually used an apostrophe correctly this time. For generations, many still living with memories of those harsher times, and many still dealing with its harsh aftertaste. Hey, you know what? He's able to understand what systemic racism is. That's actually pretty good on him for that. Unfortunately, many still are in the chains of the metaphorical Democrat plantation without knowledge of it. And there we go. You know, I'll be real with you. If you want to win black votes, maybe don't use such harsh racialized language. I can't speak for every black person. Heck, I'm not even black myself, but like, if I were and someone was using such harsh racialized language to describe a political affiliation I might have, I'd probably feel pretty insulted. Now, the Democrats, this city, and the jail target white people. Republicans, bonus points if Trump supporters, and especially January 6th defendants. They call Trump supporters deplorables, just like they did to the black population in Montgomery. You know, like that Hillary Clinton line, the basket of deplorables thing, that line just never goes away. I mean, is he saying that... But at the same time, like, who are the they? He says the Democrats, this city, and the jail. I'm just a bit confused as to who the they are. So, okay, wait. Then they call white people evil through the schools apostrophe critical race theory and over the media, both avenues of attack used in Montgomery in the past. Okay. Well, I'm just going to reread this, just as flat as I can, and I want you, the listener, to try to make sense out of it, okay? Okay. Now, the Democrats, this city, and the jail target white people, comma, Republicans, open parenthesis, bonus points if Trump supporters, end parenthesis, comma, and especially January 6th defendants. They call Trump supporters, quote-unquote, deplorables, just like they did to the black population in Montgomery. They call white people evil through the schools' critical race theory and over the media, both avenues of attack used in Montgomery in the past. Okay. Is he trying to say that the city, the people of the residents, people who live in the District of Columbia control the schools and the media? Is he trying to say that the jail controls the schools and the media throughout the country? Which schools and which media? Or, okay, let's be real. He probably means to say that it's the Democrats, the nebulous left-wing conspiracy that shows up in so many Neo-Tillmanite ramblings. Or not a conspiracy, sorry, establishment. But yeah, I guess establishment and or conspiracy / conspiracy. But now, the best part. He talks about how they're using the media and the schools to attack people. Okay, my listeners, remember that time I covered the George Wallace speech? What did George Wallace say again? Hey, editor, just make a cut right here and insert that little file I made of that specific line, the one I'm talking about. You can even leave this little notice in. It adds to the flavor of the video, if you ask me. We must not be misled by left-wing incompetent news media that day after day feed us a diet of fantasy telling us we are bigots, racists, and hate-mongers to oppose the destruction of the Constitution and our nation. A left-wing monster has risen up in this nation. It has invaded the government. It has invaded the news media. It has invaded the leadership of many of our churches. It has invaded every phase and aspect of the life of freedom-loving Americans. It consists of many and various powerful interests, but it has combined into one massive drive and is held together by the cohesive power of the emotion, setting forth civil rights as supreme to all. But in reality, it is a drive to destroy the rights of private property, to destroy the freedom and liberty of you and me. And my friends, where there are no property rights, there are no human rights. Red China and Soviet Russia are prime examples. You know, I once actually had a... Oh, what was it? Oh, yeah, I need to find it again, but I had this old academic article about the way that folks in the South viewed the quote-unquote mainstream media. And let's just say a lot of folks in the South, they had that same persecution complex, this feeling that the media was specifically out to get them, these white folks in the South. They referred to ABC as something like, the Afro or Asshole Broadcasting Company. They called CBS sorry to say this, Colored Broadcasting Service. And I am not going to say what they called NBC, but I think you can figure it out. Finally, they call us January 6th defendants, quote, worse than the Taliban and the biggest threat to democracy. I don't know okay, he's giving a quote right here, like a specific quote, okay? He doesn't specify who said it. Then in parentheses, it's supposed to be a constitutional republic. And I have to say a few things. One, a democracy and a republic are not mutually exclusive. It is very possible to have a republic that is democratic in nature. You can also have a republic that is not democratic in nature. In fact, to give you an example, for I think still technically the majority of this nation prior to the early 1900s, senators were not directly elected by residents of the states that the senators represent. Rather, they were appointed by the states, by the state governments themselves. And that's an example of how you can have a republic that is not exactly democratic. But now the best part, I want to say, no, if you want to get that annoying, we're not a democracy, we're a republic. Well, no, we're not a republic. We're a fucking empire, baby. And you want proof? Look down at your feet, Brandon. You're in the District of Columbia, all right? There's nearly 1 million people living there. I think maybe 700,000. They got no senators, no representation. They're practically at the total whim of the feds. Yeah, okay, they have some devolution authority. Okay, yeah, the feds, out of the goodness of their heart, ooh-woo, gave them the ability to elect their own mayors and council members. But guess what? The feds can take that power back whenever they feel like it. Don't forget, we got Guam, we got American Samoa, we got Puerto Rico. Do they get any representation? Nope. But they are our colonies, our territories. So we are not a constitutional republic. We are an empire. Empire! Wow! Let me play my empire song. It's a... Take a bite. That was me poorly playing Rule Britannia on my automaton. May as well use this thing. Edgar Hoover. This is the first time I've occasionally seen him referred to as John Edgar Hoover, but I've never seen J. Edgar Hoover just referred to as Edgar Hoover. Director of the FBI, as well as the FBI. So Edgar Hoover, in parentheses, director of the FBI, end parentheses, as well as the FBI. So the director of the FBI and the FBI itself, he had to make two little categories for that, said Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, the Black Panthers, the NAACP, and Angela Davis were, quote, were the, quote, biggest threats to democracy, end quote, as well. I'm going to say I'm pretty sure the FBI said much nastier things than that, and I'm not really familiar with them using those exact quotations. The thing is, he puts them in a quote. Of course, I don't expect him to actually cite this. The shift of hate against us nationally is, in my opinion, best encapsulated by internal Facebook documents reported by the Washington Post, showing 90% of removed hate speech was directed toward white people, especially white men. Okay, I actually spent a while trying to look for this. I poured through a bunch of Washington Post documents articles about this. I couldn't find that 90% statistic anywhere. Now, even if it was true, though, it doesn't exactly show what he thinks it does. Because this could very much mean that Facebook is just more proactive in removing hate speech directed towards white men than any other ethnic group. Like, that is one thing you could extrapolate from these statistics, assuming they were correct. The thing is, though, that type of extrapolation would go against Brandon's victimhood narrative that he relies on to get him through the night. Montgomery was one of the harshest cities for the black population in the 1950s. Montgomery was one of the harshest cities for the black population in the 1950s. Yes, the one black population that existed in the 1950s. Similarly, this city, especially this jail, is one of the harshest for a white male Trump supporter or a partaker in the welcomed museum tour / insurrection at the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Good God, like, this guy doesn't even feel bad. Like, this guy had the perfect opportunity just to say something like, okay, yeah, I did something bad. I didn't mean to do it. I was just going along with the crowd, you know, I didn't want to get trampled, and I didn't, you know, hurt anyone or cause any property damage. But no, he has to act like he's totally innocent, like he's a complete and total angel being aggrieved and victimized by the nebulous left-wing establishment that controls all the levers of power that really matter. Even this judge, who was appointed by Donald Trump, is helping to enable this nebulous left-wing establishment that secretly or clandestinely controls all the levers of power that really matter. God help you if you were all three in the jail. Okay, I'll be honest with you. I think it's just his fucking attitude. Like if I were in jail and I had to deal with someone who was this whiny, I'd probably want to deck him too. Like, I can't fight for shit, but like, I'd probably just deck that fucking nerd. No, honestly. Now, nerds at least put some effort into what they make. Like, if this guy were a nerd, he'd probably be using, like, you know, a shit ton of $5 words, mostly correctly. But this dude barely seems to understand how the English language works. Now, I will say I can't blame him. English is a pretty annoying and inconsistent language. But still, come on, man. This hate for others based off race... Okay, no. It's not based off. I didn't even notice this at first. Based on race and arbitrary classification is exactly what Martin Luther King Jr. spoke out against as a pastor in Montgomery, right across the street from the state capitol, the cradle of the Confederacy and Civil War Confederacy. The cradle of the 1950s Confederacy and Civil War Confederacy. This is... You know what? That was one sentence. I'm going to reread it. Enjoy this run-on sentence again. This hate for others based off race and arbitrary classifications is exactly what Martin Luther King Jr. Oh, God, I just noticed something. Oh, God. So, like, you know, there's a little period after Junior? Well, assuming he typed this up, the autocorrect must have messed up and made the words, the S and spoke capitalized, thinking that the period was the end of a sentence rather than the end of the Junior abbreviation. Oh, God. Okay, wait. This hate for others based off race and arbitrary classifications is exactly what Martin Luther King Jr. spoke out against as a pastor in Montgomery, right across the street from the state capitol, the cradle of the 1950s Confederacy and Civil War Confederacy. Okay, first I just have to point out, when I first read this, I thought he was saying that MLK was a pastor who pastored a church in Montgomery, Alabama, which is not true. But after reading it a couple more times, I realized he probably meant that Martin Luther King Jr., as a pastor, was speaking out in Montgomery, Alabama. Which makes a bit more sense, but this guy's grammar is atrocious. At the same time, the cradle of the 1950s Confederacy and Civil War Confederacy. Like, in the Civil War, there was an official Confederacy, but when he talks about the quote-unquote 1950s Confederacy, does he mean informal confederacy? Does he mean a quasi-confederacy? I'm no pastor, but I too speak against these prejudices and abuses right across the street from the new cradle of the Confederacy, Washington, D.C. The Capitol building is literally right across the street from the courthouse you're reading this from. Okay, so I just have to point out that he could have at least had said something possibly clever, but the way this is worded, like, he says right across the street from the new cradle of the Confederacy, Washington, D.C., he's in Washington, D.C. He can't be right across the street from Washington, D.C. He's not in Virginia or Maryland. But then he's like, oh, I meant the Capitol building. Okay, then, like if you're saying the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., okay, fine, at least you're consistent. But this is just gobbledygook. I'm not MLK, but I too speak out about these abuses from a Democratic city-run jail in Washington, D.C. You know, you know what? I'm going to have to double check just right now. Maybe I messed up. Maybe he is being put in a city jail instead of a federal jail for some reason. Maybe I got it wrong in my memory, because I just need to put this to rest in my own head. Let me, hang on. Well, I'm just going to cut out the empty space, I guess. Okay, I just checked. Apparently I was partially correct, and so is he. He is currently held, well, I found a website called American Gulag, which it's dedicated to trying to support the Jan 6 defenders, or plaintiffs, and it told me where he was incarcerated. He's incarcerated in a jail that is run by the District of Columbia Department of Corrections, which, basically it turns out that that jail is responsible for holding, basically people who are awaiting trial in a federal case, as well as people awaiting trial in a DC local case. So, yeah, honestly, I guess I was incorrect earlier. But you know what? I'll keep that in, even as just a reminder to myself that, hey, I can be wrong, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. Also, I do not want to have to re-record a lot of that stuff. Well, all right, I messed up. Okay. I will say, however, I'm not sure exactly. Let me think for a second. Exactly what the rules are for this jail, and if people awaiting trial in a federal court get any sort of different treatment from those awaiting trial in a DC court. Okay, so I'm not MLK, but I too speak out again about these abuses from a Democratic city-run jail in Washington, D.C., just as MLK did from the Democratic city jail of Birmingham, Alabama. You know? This... How much you want to bet this guy cannot take criticism at all? I bet real money. Even my black brothers in Montgomery were able to attend church, have clergy, attend school, go to a barber... But gotta put a comma, and see their families, even if they were segregated. Therefore, I argue to you, at least in these areas, we have it worse than the black population did in 1950s Montgomery. Let me reread that. Even my black brothers in Montgomery were able to attend church, have clergy, attend school, go to a barber, and see their families, even if they were segregated. Therefore, I argue to you that at least in these areas, we have it worse than the black population did in 1950s Montgomery. Does he think that this only ever happens to him and his ilk? You know, I actually currently have a friend who's in the county jail. He, I don't remember everything he was in for. I know, there was some shoplifting charges, and one thing that happened was he accidentally wrote the date wrong that he was supposed to go into court, and he then turned himself in the next day, of course, when he realized his mistake. And, maybe when he gets out, I should interview him. But basically, even the county jail has a lot of issues, and I really do have to ask, does this guy think that it's only his jail, only treating him poorly, specifically him and his ilk? Because that's the vibe I'm really getting. As for how the black prisoners or inmates in the Montgomery jail in the 1950s were treated, I honestly just didn't feel like... I just can't bring myself to look that up right now. Next page. I know some laugh at this. Perhaps like some of them you find this to be ridiculous or offensive. After all, unlike them, we aren't being targeted financially by the Confederacy or Democrats. period. Oh, wait. Lewis Lerner weaponized the IRS against us in the Obama administration. Okay, wait. Yeah, I think I know what he's referencing. Like, in 2008 or 9 or... Sorry, 2009 or 10 or so, the Obama administration got into some hot water for just kind of asking the IRS to specifically... to be a bit more aggressive in... basically, you know, investigating the tax-exempt status of various right-wing, mostly Tea Party groups. Again, this happened, like, this happened about 10 or so years ago. Or possibly even more than 10 or so years ago. Well, officers aren't killing us without being charged. Oh, wait, Lieutenant Boyd is a hero for killing Ashley Babbitt, and the cops who murdered Roseanne Boyland are as well. Watch the videos if you haven't. They are online to the public if you search. Watch them beat her unconscious, swollen face, even more with a baton and their boots. Okay, like, Roseanne Boyland? I actually had to look her up. She was a lady who was... she was basically... I think she was a recovering addict, but she got high before the riot. Then during the riot, like... She basically collapsed from her drug use and then got trampled. I don't know exactly why he picked her because, like, I initially thought she got trampled to death. It turned out I think the coroner said she technically died before being trampled from, like, I think some sort of withdrawal or something. But I'm not aware of the cops killing her. As for Ashley Babbitt... Wait a second. I need to check something real fast. How is he? Oh my God! I just noticed he misspelled her name. Ashley is spelled A-S-H-L-I. He spells it A-S-H-L-E-Y. You know, if you want to try to honor someone's death, at least spell their name right, you dingus. And wait a second. He even spelled her last name wrong. Oh my God! You know, her last name is B-A-B-B-I-T-T. He only spelled it with one T. Spelled it like rabbit, but with a B. Oh my God. Now, personally, like, I think it's unfortunate that Ashley Babbitt died. I don't think she should have died, but let's be real here, okay? If she were a left-wing protester and, you know, she charged a barricade and got shot to death, these same MAGA assholes would be like, oh, play stupid games, win stupid prizes, lib. And I mean, heck, they were even saying that shit about George Floyd. They'll say, like, oh, you know, he was on fentanyl. Oh, you know, he asked to be placed down out of the cop car. I should mention he didn't ask to have he didn't ask to be restrained by his neck. Like, seriously, cops can restrain someone without suffocating them? But no, when it's one of their own, it has to be, oh, she's a pure innocent angel who died unfairly. And that's what, as I've said before, and I'll say it a million more times, they're not mad that the system is rigged. They're mad that it is not rigged in their favor. They also beat us in jail and get away with it. Officers Holmes and Taylor have committed multiple offenses and are still employed at the jail, have no suspicions, and are praised by workers. Have no suspensions and are praised by workers. I mean, I want to say, like, assuming he's right, that sucks, and he shouldn't have to deal with that. However, the way he writes this, it's very clear that he just seems to assume it only ever applies to him and his ilk. Like, just about, like, any jail environment has a real power imbalance in which, even though on paper guards are supposed to be held to certain standards, you are, to an extent, really just at the mercy of the warden and or the guards. So, like, basically, I want to say this sucks. He shouldn't have to go through it. But the way he's writing it, there's an implication that it's only ever happening to him and his fellow Trump supporters. And this type of whiny, grating attitude is very, very insulting. At least we can meet in the cradle of the Confederacy and know a violent mob of Democrat domestic terrorists covering their faces won't show up and attack or kill us like the KKK. Oh wait, the leftist/Democrat-funded groups of Antifa and BLM cover up their faces and do that to us. Yeah, like, Antifa is... Okay, say whatever you want about Antifa. They kind of strike me as a little kooky at times, a little kooky for lack of a better word. Like, if only because they seem to hate everybody. Like, seriously, just think about it for a second, all right? If you were in the employ of the Democrats, or actually, let me reword this. Like, basically, it's an interesting case of cognitive dissonance. On the one hand, the blue cities are being burned by Antifa, who are also by Antifa and BLM, who are paid by the Democrats. So it's like, if you honestly believe that Antifa and BLM are being paid by the Democrats to cause mayhem, then why would they be causing mayhem in their own Democrat-run areas? And it's not even like the Democrats, it's not even like the original KKK who were basically forcing the Southern Republicans out of office to secure power for the Democrats. Like, the Democrats are already in charge. But wait, they call Trump supporters racists and Nazis. That means they can't be the bad guys, right? Okay, so is he saying that Antifa and BLM call them Nazis and racists? The beauty of this is the implication that he believes that Antifa and BLM... Wait a second. Yeah, no. That Antifa and BLM are somehow capable of being popular enough, or at least having enough sway in the media to affect public opinion? Actually, no, now that I think about it, he really does seem to believe that. He implied earlier that the Democrats run the media and the schools. They also seem to be running Antifa and BLM. So presumably the same Democrats who he seems to believe are in charge of just about everything can, I guess, manipulate public opinion. Okay, at least our people aren't being targeted by Democrat bombers like our black brothers were back then. However, in May 2020, Democrat domestic terrorists and insurrectionists were firebombing the White House and were preparing car bombs outside it. I actually checked for this. I really couldn't find what he was referring to. If anyone in the audience knows what he's referring to, please let me know. The man you personally know that I met in the jail, the Supreme Court bomber who struck months before January 6, 2021, didn't just show a capability to firebomb the Supreme Court and the police vehicles outside of it. He shared with me that he had, quote, created dirty bombs with used smoke detectors and other devices, end quote, and end quote, then comma, and gave them to an accomplice who shared he would, quote, blow them up in areas where lots of Republicans were present, end quote, period. Okay, who was this? Like, I actually tried looking for this individual online, even, narrowing down these search results, and I'm like, I can't find, like, in this general time frame, I can't find anyone who got arrested for doing that. Now, I'm not saying it didn't happen, I'm just saying I can't seem to find it. But I'm also saying that if you met this guy, what's his name? I really want to know. Despite this, the FBI seemed uninterested in this information, as did my attorney. Okay, wait, there's a single set of quotes here, but I can clearly tell he put those in by accident because it's like period, space, quote, space, and this. So this was their response to me. Quote, that doesn't help us. Do you have any information on anyone who attended the January 6th insurrection? So, wait a second. Just imagine this, okay? Like, just imagine you are, being questioned and you have an attorney present. And hang on, okay, you have an attorney present, and they're like, okay, do you know anyone who was at the insurrection on January 6, 2021? And you're like, no, but that guy who's currently in jail, he planned much worse things. I mean, that's like the ultimate whataboutism, and it doesn't even make any sense. Like, even if he was absolutely correct, the guy's currently in jail. This Brandon had nothing to do with that guy who's apparently a thing and currently in jail. But he was so fixated on just needing to feel aggrieved and victimized that he had to say, well, what about that guy who's currently in jail? Like, or wait a second. No, yeah, he says, the man you personally know that I met in jail. So, okay, he met him in the jail. He's currently in the jail. Why would the FBI need to hunt him down? He's already been caught. But now, here's the best part. Let me just go back a little. This was their response. That doesn't help us. Do you have any information on anyone who attended the January 6th insurrection? My response to them was, yes, I do. Most of them are awesome and they love America just like I do. Oh my God. Like, talk about a fucking brat. He's like, yeah, we're awesome. We did it because we're awesome. And like, this is that type of popular elitism as well. You know, it's this idea of basically because I abide by a certain set of social rules and norms, the system should specifically favor me, be bent to me, and reward me. And it's clear he has that mindset, you know, that mindset of because I, Brandon, abide by a set of social norms, I deserve praise, I deserve privilege, and me and my buddies are awesome for doing so. But look at that guy who doesn't abide by them. You should be focusing on him, even though they've already caught him, apparently. Oh yeah, I almost forgot to mention, when I was trying to look for Supreme Court bombings around that time, I was mostly able to just find the Supreme Court looking at the Boston bombers case in appeal. That's it. At least all the bombers are held accountable, unlike back then. Oh wait, virtue signaling select January 6 committee members let the leftist bombers of the White House and Capitol building go, while calling Meemaw, Granny, a domestic terrorist for taking a photo inside the Capitol on January 6th. Okay, wait, is there more than one bomber? Or is it just one guy you met in jail? Even if it was just that one guy you met in jail, they caught him. All right, they caught him. He's in jail. You know, the authorities are dealing with him. This in particular, January 6th, was an angry mob whipped up by the president. You know, I actually read through that speech that Trump gave that day, and oh my God, it is so fucking whiny. Like, and you know, for anyone who might be thinking, oh, Trump didn't cause it, no. Let me explain what happened, all right? So January 6th was the day that they were counting the Electoral College votes. There was a rumor going around that Mike Pence, as the vice president and president of the Senate, had the authority to unilaterally just give that vote to Trump, or give that election to Trump. Even on the day of January 6th, Mike Pence tweeted on his official Twitter account that basically that he did not have that authority. Now, of course, these schmucks were utterly convinced that the election was stolen. It wasn't. They just need to feel aggrieved and victimized yet again. And they felt that Mike Pence was committing some sort of act of betrayal by not using a power that, let me remind you, that he never had to begin with. Now, reading through that speech, it's very clear that Trump literally believed that Pence had that authority and wasn't using it. For all intents and purposes, Trump may as well have been saying, will nobody rid me of this turbulent vice president? And in fact, and that's basically the reason why the early rioters were yelling, hang Mike Pence, as they went through the halls, because they were mad that Pence was not using an authority that, let me remind you, he never had. And the best part is, Trump still believes this, and I know this because at least a year or so later, when a reporter asked him about, what did you think of the hang Mike Pence chants, Trump said, I can't blame them, because, they were angry that Pence wasn't using the authority that he never fucking had. I do actually have to love how this guy's completely ignoring the fact that, a bunch of people broke into his workplace and were yelling, hang Mike Pence. What if I broke into your workplace and just started chanting, hang Brandon with me and my buddies, and we set up a noose right outside your workplace? Imagine we did that. Well, actually, you don't have to, because we can just imagine the hissy fit he would throw, the rage and the bile that would just spew from his system, almost like a volcanic eruption. But at the same time, I can also imagine there'd be this joy there, this feeling that, yes, he can feel vindicated in his victimhood. Yes, he is the victim, always the victim. Vanished mere. Okay, now this next paragraph is probably going to be my favorite. At least the Democrat Attorney General is fully pursuing charges against all the bombers, unlike in Montgomery and Birmingham, right? Quite the contrary. Merrimack Garland dropped the charges of the White House and Capitol bombers. Quote, quick, get that angry soccer mom at that school board meeting. She's protesting my family's investments in critical race theory, or in criminal race theory. For reference, it should be Merrick Garland, not Merrimack. So let me just try to read this again, all right? At least the Democrat Attorney General is fully pursuing, unlike in Montgomery and Birmingham, right? Quite the contrary. Merrimack Garland dropped the charges of the White House and Capitol bombers. Quote, quick, get that angry soccer mom at that school board meeting. She's protesting my family's investments in criminal race theory. Okay, I know he means critical race theory, but like, investments? Investments? You can now invest in an abstract legal concept? Merrimack Garland and investments in criminal race theory. Of course, this ignores the fact that many school board members have reported receiving literal death threats from basically angry militia and Proud Boy members who want to try to intimidate them. But that would go against the victimhood narrative that Brandon has so wonderfully woven for himself. In fact, I'm facing even more time in prison than the Supreme Court bomber. Decades even more than many murderers. A steep penalty for walking into the Capitol with permission from Capitol Police, taking some rad selfies, and leaving on my own without even being told to leave. So, I've actually spoken to some people who seem to think that because, the Capitol Police, for lack of a better word, they retreated, they were like overwhelmed and outnumbered, they retreated. But no, people use that as a justification to be like, see, they were letting them in, it's a conspiracy. Like, no, dude, they fucking retreated. My absolute favorite is when people say, like, oh, Trump invited 10,000, like, asked to send 10,000 National Guard members and Pelosi refused. Like, no, that didn't happen. I couldn't find any documents of that happening. It never happened. Trump never gives a fuck. If you could have any documents of that happening, let me know. I'll gladly be accepted to be proven wrong. Heck, even earlier, I kept in the part where I've admitted I was wrong in this video. Oh my God, I'm over an hour in. I'm not even halfway done. Oh, this is going to be fun. This is going to be fun. This is typically the point where either most concede I have some good points or where the attacks come flying in. This guy talks just like Dave Sim right now, only worse grammar. Some make arguments outside of ad hominem attacks, but very few successfully go on to attempt to refute the central point. What is the... Wait, the central point was that... I'm still not quite sure what the central point is. It's basically just... It just strikes me as where I'm a victim. I want special privileges because I abide by a set of social norms that I believe are entitled to special privileges. Regardless of where you stand, I will concede to you the obvious. Us white people, Trump supporters, there should be a comma, and even January 6th defenders, then in all caps, as a whole, do not have it as bad as our black brothers did under the Democrats of Montgomery in the 1950s. Okay, I just realized something that was implied here is that he seems to be implying that it was specifically the city government of Montgomery that was inflicting harm upon the black communities of, well, Montgomery. And that is true, but you might recall from my George Wallace video how I pointed out how the Alabama state constitution works. As a reminder, it is the longest active constitution in the world by word count. It centralizes virtually all the power within the capital. Which, okay, yeah, it is also Montgomery. But at the same time, Montgomery has both a municipal capital as well as the state capital. Or not a municipal capital, municipal power mayoral system thingy, as well as the actual state capital itself being there. So I do need to ask, like, is he referring to Montgomery as the capital of Alabama or Montgomery as its municipal government? However, things are getting worse for us, especially in the past year with the selective hateful Democrats in charge, particularly in this city, and even more so in this city's jail. And he didn't even use the correct plural of cities, or of city. He just used the plural of city. But of course, this confuses me even more. When he references the Democrats in charge, does he mean the Democrats who are in charge of the federal House, or the Democrats who are in charge of, the District of Columbia's municipal authority? The world may never know. Hang on. I accidentally dropped the paper. This discrimination, racism, and hate must be put to a stop and punished. We know where it leads based on the past. Fast forward from the past of 1950s Montgomery to present day, oh God, South Africa, a country similar to ours in how in the past they grossly mistreated their black populations. Nelson Mandela, two L's, was pivotal in putting it to a stop. Putting it to a stop. He too spoke out against his unjust treatments from his oppressors from a jail cell. Then to my memory, without internet, he was elected, or then to my memory, without internet, there's no comma here, so I guess he's saying what he remembers without internet, because it's just, hang on. Then to my memory, without internet, he was elected president in the 1980s or 1990s. Okay, I presume he means that he's trying to remember when Nelson got elected president and he just can't check the internet. But, of course, his poor grammar implies that Nelson Mandela got elected without the use of internet somehow. Similar to how just a few decades later we elected our first black president in 2008. Look at South Africa today. Now white people are being targeted by both citizen and government. They are being murdered, treated worse in society, and their own government years ago passed legislation giving the government the ability to take away white people's homes and land, all in the name of reparations. Okay, so I tried looking into this, and it looks like in 1913 or so, apartheid South Africa passed a law called the Natives Land Act. Hang on, you can hear me clicking. I'm just looking for it my computer at the moment. All right. Okay, yeah, so basically the Native Lands Act, starting in 1913 and not appealed until 1991, basically made it damn near impossible for black Africans to own land in South Africa. Even though the law was repealed in 1991, of course, when apartheid South Africa officially ended, much of the land that kind of was taken by this act was never returned, and basically a lot of wealth disparity in South Africa, or a lot of racial wealth disparity in South Africa still exists from back when the government could just take the land of black residents and effectively give it to white residents. It looks like in 2018 or so, the South African Parliament passed a law that could allow some of this land that was taken from that act to be just kind of forcibly taken without any sort of compensation and given back to, I guess, the descendants of the families who that land was taken from. I think I will say that I don't know enough about ethics to determine if it's right or wrong, or even if I understand South African law enough. However, this seems to be something that is a bit specific to kind of South African issues. And yeah, this guy's trying to very clearly shoehorn it into, basically into American politics. I mean, like, it seems to be specifically only referring to land that was taken as a result of the 1913, land law. Likewise, when he talks about how, whites in South Africa are being specifically murdered by citizens in the government, I have seen some stories of, white South Africans being murdered, but South Africa just has a crime problem in general. Now, I'm not saying that white people in South Africa have absolutely no risks. I don't want to even imply that. I'm just saying that this guy, Brandon, is clearly convinced of a deliberate plan to specifically harm white South Africans as a whole as revenge for apartheid. I could not find anything to demonstrate such a thing exists. Most of the new victims of racism, the whites, had nothing to do with oppressing anyone. In these areas, South Africa seems to be decades ahead of us, but we are showing some early signs that we could be on the same path. Joe Biden has been passing legislation that excludes white people from benefiting, then in open parenthesis, farming, student loans, something else. Farming, comma, student loans, comma, something else. He seems to have forgotten to put a closed parenthesis there. And I actually do want to point out, I checked this one myself, a part of Joe Biden's COVID relief bill, like COVID relief omnibus bill, it took into account that over the past centuries or so, African-American farmers had been systemically being screwed over by, basically by, farming, but basically by acts of the government passed to help out farmers. Like, basically, they were legally entitled to various aid and benefits that they just weren't allowed to collect on. And what Biden did was he put in that bill, which included stuff to help farmers, he basically put aside a special portion of money specifically designed to help black farmers to make sure that it would be harder for them to be screwed over by the government. Now, whether or not you think that is ethical or not is irrelevant, because Biden did not pass any laws that prohibited white people from benefiting regarding quote-unquote farms, student loans, and something else. But of course, that doesn't fit into the victimhood narrative. He is excluding hiring people based off race, quote, and then in parentheses, Supreme Court and Vice President's position. Okay, Vice President apostrophe S, positions, because there's two people. So wait, does he think that Kamala Harris and Ketanji Brown Jackson are unqualified for their jobs? Because whether or not you agree or disagree with them, I would say that both individuals are quite qualified for their jobs. Like, whatever your opinion on Kamala Harris, good or bad, she does have a lot of experience in both state and federal law, as well as being an elected official from California for many years. And Ketanji Brown Jackson was, is a very gifted legal mind, has been a federal judge for many years. They are they're very qualified individuals, even if you might personally disagree with their outlooks on law and politics. Yeah. Let's see. And he has been pushing for kids in the nation to be taught how evil white people are through critical race theory. Yeah, I couldn't find any evidence of Biden supporting anything remotely similar to that. This capital city and the American people must, in caps, put a stop. End the discrimination and racism against us. It is wrong to employ toward anyone. End the discrimination and racism against us. It is wrong to employ toward anyone. Towards anyone. Oh, God. This guy needs an editor. An editor. When I asked some guards why they treat us differently, they share, "Yous all be the leaders of violent groups," end quote, open quote. "Yous be having white privilege," comma, end quote, parenthesis, end quote. Then, "Murga herga durga," in all caps, and then in parentheses, "them talking in a mask." So wait a second, is Murga herga durga what he's saying it sounds like they're saying? Or are they actually saying Murga herga durga to mock him? And of course, yous all be the leaders of violent groups. Yous be having white privilege. All right. Ignore me or laugh at our suffering. Honestly, Brandon, I'm not laughing at your suffering. I'm laughing at your fucking attitude. Some praise one another for hurting us, whether it be spiritually, emotionally, mentally, or even physically. Okay, no, you know what? Yeah, it's unbecoming and very inappropriate of a jail guard to be doing that. Okay, assuming he's correct, it is inappropriate and unbecoming for a jail guard to be doing that. As I say, everybody deserves civil rights, even scoundrels and scum. They cover for each other's abuses, just as they did in Montgomery. I still have to ask again, does he think that this is only ever happening to him and that this doesn't seem to happen throughout the U.S.? Because I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. The vibe I get is that he's just mad it's happening to him. Most people wonder how the Nazis got away with what they did. I wonder how many white Democrats in the 50s and 60s decried the treatment of the Jews in Europe and then turned to spit, deprive, discriminate, beat, or kill their black neighbors. Of course, you gotta bring the Nazis in. I mean, if basically one thing that the Nazis did is that, like, when it came to getting elections and getting votes, judging by the last kind of free election in Germany, they were able to, I'd say, sway maybe a third of the German population. And even so, there were still a lot of people who really did not like Hitler. The thing is, it wasn't until after Hitler took power when he basically made it impossible and illegal to meaningfully form any decent opposition to him that the people of Germany effectively weren't easily able to get any other viewpoints about politics or life. And I would say that's probably the main bulk of how the Nazis were able to get away with it, if only because they made it effective, like legally and effectively impossible to get any unapproved information and to organize any sort of meaningful opposition. Many people I've met are baffled how others could have treated the black population with so much hate and contempt. Some of the same people, within minutes, if not seconds after, began touting their hatred for white men or Trump supporters. Is he talking about people in the jail? People he's met in general? I'm not saying this didn't happen. I'm just saying I'm having a hard time believing it. Some of these people shared they would be the ones to stand up against the crowd and put racism and discrimination to an end if they could go back in time. I share their sentiments. However, people don't truly learn from history. Thus, history repeats itself. Many don't recognize they are those same hateful people, just in a new time frame with new targets. You know, he's right. I mean, he fits that mold almost perfectly, especially down to the regular complaints about the nebulous left-wing establishment that controls the levers of power, the same stuff that George Wallace and the segregationists spent decades whining and kvetching about. Heck, even the same stuff that Tillman was kvetching about as he led literal lynch mobs against African Americans. Hey, if he wants to play that nasty game, I can play it too. Just saying. Hang on. They are unknowingly hypocrites and meaningless virtue signalers, targeting and praising the targeting of others based on race or arbitrary classifications. What these people and everyone must understand is that regardless of race, arbitrary classifications, or beliefs, we are all children of God, and regardless of anyone's feelings or what is trending, everyone should be treated equally as you also would want to be treated. Like, is there a word for that? You know, when somebody, like, mixes metaphors? I guess it's a mixed metaphor. Like, he's saying you should treat everyone equally and then, you know, treat others the way you want to be treated, or do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But he's basically saying, treat others equally as you would also want to be treated. What the fuck, dude? I worry, though, the Democrats have more power, experience, and cunning than they did decades ago. Dude, you know what? On the screen here, I'm just going to put an image from Ballotpedia showing how many states have Republican trifectas in government. The Republicans also have an edge in the Electoral College, they have an edge in the Senate, and they've gerrymandered the fuck out of the House of Representatives. But of course, those facts just get in the way of the victimhood narrative. The judges in Montgomery were either silent or helping cause the abuse of the black population. The media and mobs of that city did and would ridicule any for daring to defend against the city ''S most hated group. Now this is interesting. Now, you know what, editor, just put that clip of me quoting George Wallace in again. We must not be misled by left-wing incompetent news media that day after day feed us a diet of fantasy telling us we are bigots, racist, and hate-mongers to oppose the destruction of the Constitution and our nation. A left-wing monster has risen up in this nation. It has invaded the government. It has invaded the news media. It has invaded the leadership of many of our churches. It has invaded every phase and aspect of the life of freedom-loving Americans. It consists of many and various powerful interests, but it has combined into one massive drive and is held together by the cohesive power of the emotion, setting forth civil rights as supreme to all
But in reality, it is a drive to destroy the rights of private property, to destroy the freedom and liberty of you and me. And my friends, where there are no property rights, there are no human rights. Red China and Soviet Russia are prime examples.
Now, an interesting Supreme Court case that you might have heard referenced was New York Times v. Sullivan. And it basically started because one thing that the kind of local Southern media would do is they would look at reporting at the civil rights movement that was critical of it, that was critical of the South and the civil rights movement. They would look for, like, generally some sort of minute error that the reports did, and then sue for defamation or libel or something like that. And that was basically it. It was kind of the local media who were angry that, you know, anyone else was actually reporting on the truth of what was going on. So they would look for just kind of minute errors, or maybe sometimes even large errors, but basically be like, see, this is proof that they are out against us. This is proof they are trying to defame us. They are trying to make us look bad. We are the victims. And of course, they would be the... But of course, this guy can't tell the difference. To him, any form of media that he doesn't like is just part of the mainstream media, and as Wallace would say, is controlled by northeastern communists. We are the city's... What is this guy's deal? Like, does he not know how to pluralize city? Right, it is CITY''S. He keeps writing CITIES, which is just the plural of cities, or of the word city. Like, for example, you might say that... let's see. Like, you might say New York City, like, I guess New York and Los Angeles are two of the biggest cities in the USA. That would be an example of a proper use of that word cities. Likewise, if you want to pluralize have a possessive for the plural of cities, or plural of city. You know, you can tell I'm just getting exhausted by this, but you know, I'm going to power through. I'm going to finish this. Hope I can finish this. I pray I can finish this. Okay, you could say something like, you know, the, hang on. Yeah, so the, you know what, hang on, I need a break. Okay, it's been about 10 seconds since I hit the pause button. A correct example of putting a possessive for the plural of city would be something like, the cities' populations are very big, to describe, you know, multiple cities put together, or just more than one city. In this case, he should be saying city''S. I am legitimately impressed that he knows how to spell the plural of cities, or the plural of city, because I remember that being a vocabulary word when I was in elementary school, but he can't seem to give it a proper possessive. Anyway, we are the city's, quote, most hated group, end quote, period. They ignored the severe issues I shared with them about our treatment, omitting them to minimize the problems to the reader and create their own, quote, white privilege crybabies, end quote, fake news narrative. Okay, wait a second. In this case, is he talking about, like, which media is he talking about? I get it, you know, if you're in his mindset, any media you don't like is the mainstream media, but at the same time, Fox News, you know, yeah, they're the most popular media, but they don't count. Like, News Corp doesn't count, even though they're like some of the most popular media in the world. Tucker Carlson, the most popular man on TV, he's not part of the mainstream media. It's always just a fucking feeling, a vague feeling, one that can be used to, you know, compartmentalize the people versus the oppressors. And in this case, I just can't get over it. It's like, the people who have literally no representation, they're oppressing me. I should have my boot over them. I should be allowed to elect representatives and senators and not them. Yeah, no taxation without representation, bucko. The Democrat media in Montgomery did the same to their targets back then, always trying to discredit, minimize, narrate, and justify. And just ends with a period right there. You know? It is interesting that the same Democrat media complained about the Northeastern establishment media. I've said this a million times before, and I'm going to keep fucking saying it. They didn't... Hey, you know what, editor? The third time. Just put that quote in the third time, please.
We must not be misled by left-wing incompetent news media that day after day feed us a diet of fantasy telling us we are bigots, racist, and hate-mongers to oppose the destruction of the Constitution and our nation. A left-wing monster has risen up in this nation. It has invaded the government. It has invaded the news media. It has invaded the leadership of many of our churches. It has invaded every phase and aspect of the life of freedom-loving Americans. It consists of many and various powerful interests, but it has combined into one massive drive and is held together by the cohesive power of the emotion, setting forth civil rights as supreme to all. But in reality, it is a drive to destroy the rights of private property, to destroy the freedom and liberty of you and me. And my friends, where there are no property rights, there are no human rights. Red China and Soviet Russia are prime examples.
Yeah. I sit by and take note speedy trial violations, discovery violations, Bail Reform Act violations, prison litigation reform violations, 1st, 4th, 6th, 8th, 10th, and 14th Amendment violations being ignored for over 1 year in many January 6th defendants' apostrophe cases. Your Honor. Okay, now he says Your Honor, but the H in honor should be capitalized. But he also just referred to him as Judge earlier. Good God. Which side would you have been on in 1950s Montgomery? Would you have helped or hurt the black population in Montgomery, Alabama? Would you be silent and let the discrimination and constitutional violations continue until someone else stopped it? Would you have helped cause and continue the abuse, or would you have put an end to it? If you deny ruling in favor for my requests for relief, you will have your answer, as will I, as will any other historically objective person. Historically objective person. You know, this guy wouldn't know objectivity if it objectively slapped him in his objective face. Objectively, this is the best pizza in the world. Objectively, I'm the good guy in all this. Objectively, I'm the victim. Don't be like the judges in 1950s Montgomery. Pass this motion and punish the criminal perpetrators. Be brave, stand out from the historical trends, stand for our Constitution for all people. Do not be persuaded by today's propagandists, then in parentheses, journalists, media. Hey, you know what? Like, one more time. Another time. Editor?
We must not be misled by left-wing, incompetent news media that day after day feed us a diet of fantasy telling us we are bigots, racist, and hate-mongers to oppose the destruction of the Constitution and our nation. A left-wing monster has risen up in this nation. It has invaded the government. It has invaded the news media. It has invaded the leadership of many of our churches. It has invaded every phase and aspect of the life of freedom-loving Americans. It consists of many and various powerful interests, but it has combined into one massive drive and is held together by the cohesive power of the emotion, setting forth civil rights as supreme to all. But in reality, it is a drive to destroy the rights of private property, to destroy the freedom and liberty of you and me. And my friends, where there are no property rights, there are no human rights. Red China and Soviet Russia are prime examples.
Thank you. Don't be persuaded by the hateful or weak politicians of this city, and don't be persuaded by the ignorant mobs of this city. Again, let me double check who the judge is real fast. Maybe it wasn't in this document. It might have been in the American Gulag site. Let's see. It is... Actually, no, it wasn't on the American Gulag site. Let's see. I'm just going to... Okay, Judge Trevor McFadden, it looks like. Trevor McFadden. Yeah, I'm checking his Wikipedia page right now. He was appointed by Donald Trump. These appointed federal judges, they are not elected by the people of the District of Columbia. Although they can hypothetically be impeached and removed from their office, that is by the federal Congress. These are lifetime appointments. Good fucking God. And don't be persuaded by the ignorant mobs of this city. I mean, he's literally describing himself as part of an ignorant mob. But of course, in his case, he was just taking some rad selfies, and he's just a victim. He didn't do a damn thing wrong. Wah. Good God. Should you need further persuading, you may consider the next section a continuation of legal arguments already presented near the end of document 58-1, or -1, filed on December 1st, 2021, but digging into new subjects mostly not already presented. Yeah, this is document 78-1. I actually was able to find document 58-1. A decent amount of it is a scanned copy of something he hand wrote. I'm going to have to go through that at some point. Okay, section 2. We're on page 11 out of 32. Finally on section 2. About an hour, 27 minutes in. God. Though already touched on in court and in document 58-1, I'd like to reinforce some positions as well as bring up new ones. To me, the argument of whether you have discretion to rule on these matters must be dealt with first. A. I offer substantial and irrefutable proof that you do, in caps, indeed have the discretion to rule on these large issues because the grievance process has been exhausted. Not only that, but it was and still is non-functional. The jail has been warned and asked for a long time to fix this, but with leadership like Catherine Landerkin, a warden who has failed other jails, there is little hope for change internally, and there has been no change, only worsening conditions. Okay, I just have to point out here that he's quite literally admitting that everybody in the... So he's saying everyone in the jail has been abused for years, but he and his ilk are getting it the worst. And I will say that close to the end, he does say you should fix this for everybody, but, like, at the same time... Oh, how do I word this properly? He spends the bulk of this acting like specifically it's him and his ilk who are getting the absolute worst of everything, and then at a few other moments he hints at, oh yeah, technically this is affecting everybody, but we're getting it the worst. I point to document 58-1, B. I point to document 58-1 on page 14. On it there are 16 people who attest that a supermajority of their grievances go unanswered. More than 1/3 of them attest they have been threatened or punished in retaliation for writing grievances. Both actions are forms of silencing our requests for relief internally as the Prison Litigation Reform Act requires, which is completely illegal and punishable. Okay, you know what? If this is right, then yes, this is a... If he's right in this statement, then that is a legitimate complaint. I would side with him if he's right. Granted, I do have to wonder what these grievances are, because I'm pretty sure if you're just writing crappy grievances to waste people's time, then you might get punished for that. Even worse, 100% of people attested... 100% of people? Or 100% of people, of those 16 people, attested that, quote, step 3 of the grievance process was unavailable, halting any would-be grievances from ever being internally exhausted, also very illegal and punishable. Even worse, in caps, 100% of people attested step 3 had not been available since they arrived, meaning it was unavailable since at least early January 2021. He actually does explain what step 3 is later on, but it might have been better if he explained that first. Okay, I need to take a break. I'm about an hour and 30 minutes in. My brain is on fire. Alright, I'm back. On December 16th, 2021, months after I filed document 58-1 and weeks after it was published on the ECF, we, January 6th defendants, had a visit. At approximately 5:50 p.m., I raised this issue to Chief Anderson of the United States Marshal Services. He is in charge of 68,000 pretrial detainees in the United States, Puerto Rico, and Guam. This is a brief synopsis of our conversation regarding the jail's grievance process. Mr. Anderson kept repeating, "You must exhaust the jail's..." Jail apostrophe... no apostrophe. Jail's grievance process first before I can help. Quotation mark, period. I raised my hand and asked, hypothetically, if one of the steps was missing from the grievance process and there was no way around it, would that make the process exhausted? He did not... Yeah, put an end quote. Hypothetically, yes, that would mean they could not truly be resolved by the jail, he responded. And what would you do? Man, I'm burping, whatever. If that was the case, I asked, I would take record of it and work to get it fixed ASAP. Okay, this time he actually put the period inside the quotations, he responded. Well, this isn't hypothetical. Step 3 of the 4-step grievance process is non-existent and it has been for at least 11 months, I shared. I would need proof, he responded. Perfect, I've got it right here, I rebutted. Like, this is like the way he's writing this is like, He responded. Okay, like, I shared. I rebutted. Just say I said or I asked or I stated. This is supposed to be a formal document, not fucking my immortal. I handed him my tablet and showed him step 1 worked, but noted, they rarely respond, but even if they do, it's typically months later. Then I showed him step 2 and shared, I don't recall ever getting a step 2 grievance back. However, even if I did, try to access step 3, see what happens. I then let him investigate and click and re-click over and over as the tablet continually read step 3 unavailable at this time. He also had someone else log in on a different tablet and the same problem occurred. He also took note that no paper forms of step 3 were available. Upon seeing this, he ended the public meeting and asked for me to come over to the table next to the microwave with him. He and I talked as he snapped photos of my tablet displaying the issue and took note no paper versions were available. I asked him if I could cite him and the photographs in court, and he shared, of course. Okay. I mean, seems like a good resolution, I guess. On 2/8/22, 1 week after I brought up Chief Anderson to the court, he and a Marvin Bickham Marshall, just say he and a Marshall Marvin Bickham, but no, Marvin Bickham, parentheses Marshall, came into the pod between 12 p.m. and 12:35 p.m. Came into the pod, and between 12 p.m. and 12:35 p.m., I spoke with the both of them. I offered a way to fix the grievance process, which they both described as still broken and non-existent. I said, no, this part is in italics for some reason, the jail should enforce requiring our signatures in person when they hand us the grievances, so they are more inclined to bring them in the first place. And when they do actually bring them, they can't just slide them under our door with a typed-up response date showing it was taken care of months ago, which most of the time it wasn't. He opens parenthesis, he doesn't close parenthesis. We need a verification process to hold these loophole criminals accountable. Loophole criminals. Did he mean to say criminal loopholes? Or is he saying that people are committing crimes by exploiting a loophole in the system? I share this with the court as a potential order to fix the broken process once and for all, and to the benefit of all. Additionally, should an inmate refuse to sign, the jail should get that refusal on tape so there's no room for loopholes for either side. Point being, again, what I've accused is verified by the marshals, the process is still broken and exhausted internally. Huh. You know, I guess he didn't explain what step 3 was. I thought he did. I must have misremembered it. Pretty easy to misremember when you're reading this dumpster fire. Although, I have to say, like, this particular part, compared to the rest of it, is actually kind of decent. At least assuming he's correct. And, well, of course, compared to the rest of the dumpster fire, this is like just a regular dumpster that's not burning. Got something in my throat. I will get through this, though. I gotta get through this somehow. Therefore, our grievance process is just as I and others attested, exhausted and had been exhausted before it even began, at least ever since our arrival. Since the grievance process has been exhausted illegally in more ways than one for over 13 months at the very least, this court has the discretion to rule on access to court violations and requests for relief. Before touching on relevant case law, I would like to address a potential excuse I foresee being used by the opposition and perhaps even recognized and supported by this court. After all, when we lightly began to discuss the issues on January 6, 2021, the court said something to the effect of, well, the jail is in a medical state right now. This to me was a warning sign I must address this excuse because I don't want it further influencing the court's decision. Although it shouldn't, considering how this court has ruled on near identical issues in the past when COVID was a bit more mysterious. I agree with the court. The jail was in a medical state. In fact, it still is. The medical state is suffering from, only to name a few of many, the medical state it is suffering from, only to name a few of many, the medical state it is suffering from, open parenthesis, only to name a few of many, close parenthesis, includes being plagued with irrational fears, enforcing nonsensical rules, being mentally incapable of following the science, being physically unable to stand up towards the destructive constitutionality, no comma here, illegal stupidity, now a comma, and being emotionally unfit to get past the disinformation and cult-like following of what I call Faucism. Like, yeah, it's fascism and Dr. Fauci mixed up. Faucism. Okay, wait. That was one sentence. Let me try to reread it. Yeah. I agree with the court. The jail was in a medical state. In fact, it still is. Or sorry, two sentences. Now this is the sentence. The medical state it is suffering from, only to name a few of many, includes being plagued with irrational fears, enforcing nonsensical rules, being mentally incapable of following the science, being physically unable to stand up towards the destructive constitutionality and legal stupidity, and being emotionally unfit to get past the disinformation and cult-like following of what I call Faucism. Oh, of course, close parenthesis, period. I ask the court to please follow the science. You know, he mockingly said follow the political science earlier, but now he's asking the court to please follow the science. Below are some helpful starting positions. Oh, God. Number 1. On the 31st of January 2022, Johns Hopkins Medical School released a study showing lockdowns and mask mandates combined were 0.2% or 0.2% effective or 99.98% ineffective. Okay, I want to first say I actually found this study. I looked at it myself. First off, it was a meta-analysis, which means that it looked at the results of other studies to try to draw a conclusion from it. Now, this is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just, I have to point out that it might have at least somewhat different research rules than a regular study. Second, it was only referring to mortality. It did not refer to things like, only referring to the mortality of effects of lockdown orders. Nothing to do with masks, nothing to do with, long-term COVID effects, nothing to do with, contagion, like how often, or even stopping contagions, or it didn't even say much about, what's the word? Yeah, basically it was only about one specific thing, and it was asking, I need to get my head straight. Did lockdown mandates reduce the mortality rate of COVID? The answer is not very much in terms of mortality rate. However, that's only one, for lack of a better word, like one and one variable. The one variable being mortality rate, and I guess the other variable just being lockdowns. It said nothing about masks, nothing about infection rates, nothing about how contagious it is. That's all it said. The thing is, to repeat what this schmuck says, he says that lockdowns and mask mandates combined, no, just lockdowns, were only 0.2% effective. But the thing is, he doesn't specify effective at what. Well, the meta-analysis did say that they weren't very effective, that lockdowns alone were not very effective at reducing the mortality of COVID. The thing is that you have to take into account that since it wasn't looking at, at how many people got affected and how many people they estimated would have gotten infected if the lockdowns never happened, it basically, I guess a better way to word it is that if you got COVID, you were probably going to die at roughly the same rate if you got it during a lockdown or if you got it without a lockdown present. I will say I've been a bit tongue-tied because I've been trying to read the study myself. It's like 60-something pages. It's a lot of medical jargon, and I do my best. You can find it in the comments. Hopefully you can come up with a better way to word it than I can. Imagine if a student going to college and only getting a 0.2% average after 2 years. If you are the parent, are you going to continue to pay astronomical prices to keep sending them to school? What if in a socialist state like New York, yeah, of course, the state that literally has Wall Street, it's socialist. Of course, this guy wouldn't know socialism if it bonked him on the head. He probably just thinks socialism is when a corporation does something woke. Seriously, just imagine, if you will, like this really strict CEO running his business, like a sweatshop, and the guy's like, let's see, does he decorate it? If he decorates his sweatshop with American flags, it's capitalism. If he decorates it with a rainbow flag, it's socialism. And that's basically it. So what if in a socialist state like New York, the community is paying to send that kid to school? Don't you think it would be inconsiderate or irresponsible of them, the government, to force the people to continue to pay for something that is so ineffective? Wait a second. So if the community is paying to send that kid to school, what exactly does that mean? Like, does it mean the local government is paying? Does it mean like a bunch of parents are pooling their resources together to pay for it? But then at the same time, the community is paying for it. But then he mentions the government, which is not the community apparently, forcing the community to continue to pay, or forcing the people to continue to pay for something so ineffective. Lockdowns and mask mandates are way more damaging, so why are we still not following the science? I can tell you why, as the bank account of a politician or a deeper look at their biggest campaign donor. Wait, I can tell you why, comma, as can the bank account of a politician or a deeper look at their biggest campaign donors. Lockdowns and mask mandates are a terrible investment for you and the community. It's way past time to sell. So wait, I can tell you why, as can the bank account of a politician or a deeper look at their biggest campaign donors. Okay. Who are they? If they can tell us why, tell me who are they? Number 2. On the 4th of February 2022, the CDC admitted natural immunity, which is not a recent discovery, is more effective than the vaccine. So I tried to find the exact statement from the CDC that he's referencing. I did find something from January 28th, 2022, and that's literally just 1 week off, so he probably just got the week wrong in his head. And specifically, the statement was that natural immunity plus the vaccine was better than just having the vaccine. Likewise, it was specifically about the Delta variant. Of course, a bunch of right-wing rags just cut the parts they wanted out and said, oh, natural immunity is better than the vaccine. No, natural immunity plus vaccine was better, than vaccine alone. But, yeah, I don't expect this guy to ever read past the headlines. Yes, doctors in the Fauci cult have been looking at me as though I'm crazy for saying this in both the DC jail and outside it. Scary times! Additionally, we all caught COVID, ironically from one of the few vaccinated people, and got over it. We have natural immunity now. We are statistically the safest pod in the DC jail in more ways than one. You're welcome, DC. We made you safer by not getting vaccinated, as you all stupidly yelled at us about how selfish it was to not get vaccinated. Don't worry, I understand most of you lack the character to apologize and admit your wrongs. No apologies needed. Get well soon. Yeah, that's rich coming from this smug prick. Like, seriously, judging by this guy's grammar, this guy's attitude, this guy's everything, he probably thinks he's all that in a bag of chips. Not to mention the perpetual need to victimize himself. I could just almost see it, even in my aphantasia, just imagining himself as Jesus being crucified and being vindicated. You know, I always like to say that the modern American conservative movement is based on 3 V's. Victimization, validation, and vindication. They have to go in that order. So first you have victimization, the idea that you are a victim of the nebulous left-wing establishment that controls all the levers of power that matter. Validation, you are valid in your concerns, and in fact everybody who matters secretly agrees with you because you're just that valid. And then vindication, well, you were right all along. Basically, yes, the nebulous left-wing establishment does control everything. And you were right in your beliefs, even though everyone else called you crazy. Or at least everyone who didn't matter or was brainwashed called you crazy. Number 3. On the 3rd of February, 2022, the CDC said the top 3 causes of death for 18 to 45-year-olds, old apostrophe S. Now he puts a fucking parenthesis in, or not parenthesis, an apostrophe in there, was fentanyl at number 1. And yet the border, oh god, he spelled border B-O-A-R-D-E-R. So for reference, B-O-R-D-E-R is like, you know, the border between nations. The border he spelled is generally like someone who skateboards, snowboards, or someone who's boarding up at a house. So it's open to all, and drugs are rampant in the DC jail. So wait. You know, you don't have to have a master's in geography to know that DC is pretty far from the border, from any border. Unless you want to count the Atlantic Ocean. You want to close down the Atlantic Ocean, buddy? Of course, this guy seems to think that the President of the United States has the ability to just magically shut down the border and that will somehow stop fentanyl from getting in, but I mean, has that ever really worked regarding drugs ever? And you see, that's the thing. It's this feeling and this aesthetic of power. Drugs find a way. They are addictive and unlike most other things. So just shutting down the border isn't going to stop fentanyl from getting in. They'll just find another way in because it's such a lucrative market. And, well, let's be real here. Shutting down the border would only give the cartels even more power. But that's the thing. He would feel safe and he would feel strong. You know, if you actually had to look at what it takes to deal with drug addiction, namely stronger community programs, that would make him feel weak, feel effeminate. And really, these schmucks just want to feel strong and feel safe. But not even actually be safe, just feel a type of, for lack of a better word, manly safeness. A stereotypically manly safeness would be a better way to word it. And any other type of safeness, no, that's weak, feminine, girly. Anyway. In second place came suicide, which is also a problem in the United States, then open parenthesis, which was made worse from ineffective tyrannical lockdowns, end parenthesis, and the DC jail. I mean, how many... I hear so much about lockdowns. What do they mean by lockdowns? I mean, I do know early on there were orders for some businesses to stay closed. Is that what they meant by lockdowns? Oh. COVID, with its inflated death rates, came at number 3. It's worthy to also note that most people that died with COVID had an average of 5 or more underlying conditions such as obesity. You know what? He wants to play that game? I'll play that game too. Why does he care so much about fentanyl? I mean, let's be real here. Most of the people who use fentanyl and die from it, they were using other drugs too. But you see, the conservative media just wants to say fentanyl, fentanyl, fentanyl. Oh, ignore the other drugs people were using, just so that way they can shut down the border and hamper our economy more. You see, I mean, I can play that game too, you dingus. Isn't it odd that Democrats quote-unquote mask shame despite that it's ineffective, and yet it is politically incorrect to fat shame despite that it is a huge factor or risk? Again, I couldn't find anything in that study, in that meta-analysis, which talked about masks. It was just about certain types, or just about lockdowns, which I should say were much more clearly defined, and it was just looking at mortality rates. Of course, this guy jumps to conclusions like a spring-loaded frog on methamphetamine. I'm not super glad my tax dollars went to help pay for the death of millions across the globe, including my grandmother, or the destruction of our economy and constitutional rights for 2 years and counting. In fact, I'm pretty pissed. So about your grandma, what happened? Like, seriously, like, I'm being real with you. You don't just bring up, oh yeah, the government killed my grandma, and don't give any more details. This is the first time he has mentioned his grandmother, and I do not recall him ever mentioning her again. Number 4. On 10/21/21, Florida had 12,000 COVID cases per 100K. New York had 25,000 per 100K. DC had 31,000 per 100K. So I actually decided to, quite literally today, the 19th of March, 2022, I went to the New York Times' COVID tracking cases thing, and I found regarding cases, I should mention, Florida came in 12 out of 56. Oh yeah, the reason it's 56 instead of 50 is because it included things like DC, Guam, Puerto Rico, American Samoa, etc. So in terms of just most cases per 100,000, Florida was 12 out of 56. New York was 23 out of 56, and DC was 47 out of 56. In terms of death, New York was 12 out of 56, Florida was 15 out of 56, and DC was 44 out of 56. I should point out, as someone who was in New Jersey at the time, New York and New Jersey were hit very hard, very early when nobody knew what the fuck was going on. And of course, Trump was like, oh, they're just blue staters, they can die all they want. Because, Trump has, I'd say, contempt for the people who like him and seething hatred for people who don't. Some noteworthy things are that Florida was the poster child for anti-lockdown and anti-mask mandate laws. D.C. was the poster child for the most intense lockdown laws currently. California was worst earlier the previous year. The vaccination rate in D.C. was sky high compared to Florida. Was? Wait, was? I guess at 10, 21, 21? Okay. Additionally, COVID mostly affects 65 and older populations. Florida, out of the 50 states, has the oldest population per capita. Despite this, Cali, with the 5th youngest population per capita, New York and D.C. all had more cases and deaths per capita. You know, you gotta love his timing. He completely ignores anything that happened afterwards. Just like, as you can see from here, no, don't look any later. Don't look any later. Just look at this specific point in time. Don't look at any greater trends. Let's see. What is even crazier is this did not account for New York's nursing home death cover-ups. Point being, lots of cover-ups happened. Even with the help of cover-ups, the mask mandates and lockdowns were 99.98% ineffective. I thought COVID was overblown. No, like seriously, it is something I try to wrap my head around. On the one hand, COVID is overblown. On the other hand, Cuomo covered up a ton of deaths. But like, are you sure they were COVID deaths? Did they not die from something else related to COVID? Of course, I don't want to actually insult anyone whose grandparents or parents or family members or friends or whoever may have been a victim of that cover-up. I just want to point out the cognitive dissonance that comes from, on the one hand, treating COVID like it's overblown and not that big a deal, and on the other hand, acting like it's such a big deal that the Democrats had to cover up the damage it caused in nursing homes. Considering the many negatives that come along with lockdowns, including but not limited to mental problems... Wait a second. So there's an odd thing with the formatting of this that I just noticed, is that, like, normally for the numbered things, what he did was he would kind of indent them a bit. Oh, wait, no. You know what? This must be the start of the next paragraph. Okay, it's a bit awkward, the formatting. All right. Or the number things over. Considering the many negatives that come along with lockdowns, including but not limited to mental problems, depression, suicide, increased murders, increased crime, obesity, drug dependency, drug overdoses, increased domestic violence, increased child abuse, loss of social skills, debt at the personal level all the way up to the global level, etc. Period. This is more of a reason to give January 6 defendants our rights back and to further the rights of others in the jail. So wait a second. Is he actually trying to argue insanity? Like, I'm being kind of serious here because, like, some of the things he mentions include, so he's saying that lockdowns, which apparently just happened all throughout 2020 and all up to January 6th, they cause increased acts of violence, increased drug dependency, increased mental issues. And he said, these reasons and these, then he says this is more of a reason, but this should be these and more, to give us our rights back. So it's like, actually, no, now that I think about it, no, wait. But yeah, is he trying to say that, the January 6 defendants were basically victims of the negative mental effects of the, I'm going to say, the non-existent long-term lockdowns that apparently happened all over the country because, people from all over the nation came to the Capitol to fuck up some shit. And basically they just weren't in the right state of mind? Or is he saying that merely being in prison compounded by the... No, wait. So yeah, being in prison, you are quite literally legally in a lockdown. So he can't be saying that the lockdown effects from COVID-19 are negatively impacting us in prison, unless he's saying that the... No, wait. Okay, wait, I think I can understand what the heck he's saying. So he's saying that the jail is locking down the triple C's and the HR double V's due to COVID, and this stuff apparently, and I guess different lockdowns in the civilian world, the non-prison world, cause bad things to happen, and those same bad things are inevitably going to happen here in the jail. Either that, or he's trying to plead insanity by saying that we were victims of the poor mental states of the lockdowns. One or the other, I guess. Oh, hang on. Wait. That's page 16. Okay, yeah. These should never have been stolen or denied in the first place. Suicide rates in jail are higher than in the civilian population. I mean, yeah, jail's a terrible place to be. Is he really surprised that suicide rate is higher up in jail than it would be other places? So taking away and refusing to give back all our rights is not only unjustified, it is unusually cruel and dangerously irrational. Okay, now he's actually being clear in what he's saying. He was making that point from earlier that jail is tough enough, and if you take away stuff due to COVID, you're just going to make it worse. Okay. Now, moving on, I want the court to keep in mind or be reminded of 3 Supreme Court rulings on both of these issues, in this motion, and the rest of my issues or access to court violations already presented in document 58-1. Number 1, the Cooper v. Peete case of 1964. They reversed an appellate court decision and agreed with the prisoner. Prisoners now had rights guaranteed by the Constitution and could therefore seek assistance from the courts to change the conditions on access to courts, political expression, freedom of religion, right to have access to law libraries, and other issues. Number 2, the 1977 Wolfish v. Levi case held with respect to pretrial detainees, they are presumed to be innocent and only had to endure their presence at trial. Any deprivation or restriction of rights beyond those which are necessary for the confinement alone must be justified by a compelling necessity. I ask the court to remember convicted prisoners are afforded these rights, and pretrial detainees, which is what we are supposed to have those rights protected even more so. We are supposed to have even greater freedoms than convicted prisoners. The opposite has happened to us in the D.C. jail. You know, I do want to say that I want to ask him what he thinks of Joe Arpaio, because, Joe Arpaio also ran a jail that, basically was infamous for being harsh and strict and holding pretrial detainees. And yet the conservatives, they loved him. They stand there, they're like, yeah, punish those criminals even though they were supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, Now, all right, I don't know what this guy in particular thinks of Joe Arpaio, but I still think it demonstrates the conservative ethos of, I conform to a set of social norms. Therefore, I deserve special privileges. The system should be bent towards me and those social norms. Third, the Thompson v. Gomez case. Here, a prisoner won a claim against a Cali prison. They are quoted as saying, quote, "The PLRA defines prospective relief as all relief other than monetary damages." So I should say I tried looking for Thompson v. Gomez. It turns out there's a lot of cases with that name. I guess a lot of people, which makes sense. Thompson and Gomez are pretty common names. So I'm really not sure which one he's referring to. Also, I just got too tired of looking. Or too tired to look, rather. They define relief, as all relief in any form that may be granted or approved by the court and includes consent decrees. This provision allows the judge, wait a second. 18 U.S. Okay, so this is the first time he actually includes a footnote to a legal citation thing. I didn't notice that the first time. I guess I don't know how to say this out loud, so I'll just put it on the screen for y'all. This provision allows the judge to force church or religious services to be allowed, free weights to be provided, earplugs to be provided, even walls to be built to reduce noise, among other actions. Additionally, it cites actual injury does not necessarily mean absolute prejudice. Significant delays that hinder or impede a claim are enough. That is very relevant to quite a few of my access to court violations as well. Now, with those fresh in the court's mind, let's get into some more case law and legal arguments, in some ways more specific. Oh, God. Number 1. The First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech. Hang on. I'm just looking at the text of the First Amendment. Okay, all this stuff is within the First Amendment. You just kind of cut a few parts of it out in a bit of a confusing way. Like, the text of the First Amendment, and I'll just read it right here. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So yeah, as you can see, it it says. So he starts normally, then just kind of cuts out or then just kind of cuts it off after, or abridging the freedom of speech. Okay, yeah. Comments. The Founding Fathers fled their countries due to many reasons. Okay. Like there are a lot of Founding Fathers, a lot of minor ones who I bet that the average American just isn't as familiar with. However, I actually checked Wikipedia, and it says the great majority were born in the 13 colonies, but 18 were born in other parts of the British Empire. England, Ireland, West Indies, and Scotland. I really have no clue what he means by the Founding Fathers fled their countries. Many referenced because of religious or political persecution. Referenced. I don't know what he means by referenced, like referencing a book. That's the reference he used. They saw this as such an important right, they put their lives on the line for it in founding this country and made it the First Amendment. Is this guy a fifth grader writing a history paper? Like this, seriously. They saw this as such an important right, they put their lives on the line for it in founding this country and made it the First Amendment. What the? This is officially given to a judge. If Congress shall make no law respecting taking away this right. If Congress shall make no law respecting taking away this right. Okay, like, any lawyers in the audience, does that mean anything? If Congress shall make no law respecting taking away this right, then no court, let alone a swamp city, let alone a crappy jail in a swamp city, should be allowed to take this right away, no excuses. I'm just going to leave this, I'm just going to leave this little paragraph on the screen, stare at it a little bit. You try to make sense of it. I can't. Number 2, the Eighth Amendment. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. Comments. The cruel and unusual punishments clause has been the basis for challenging the death penalty. It was ruled cruel and unusual even for death row inmates to only receive 22 and 2-hour rec times, and in many other areas they had more freedoms than us. Okay. What are these other areas, I guess? Does he not care as much for states' rights, like for different states to define what they count as cruel, or what? I personally was kept in my cell and not allowed to even shower for 9 days. No phone calls for weeks. Kept in a cell with no working toilet for 6 days. No laundry for a month. No sunlight for months. No haircuts since arrival. No shave since arrival. Haven't seen families' faces, like plural of family, families' faces since June. Haven't once seen a pastor. Haven't once gone to church. COVID is not an excuse to treat us worse than abused dogs. Well, it's clear he hasn't seen an editor. I will say, like, assuming this is correct, I would say he should at least have some way to get these things. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Everyone deserves civil rights, even scoundrels and scum. I can't believe I have to argue this for months on end with today's access to technology / accessible knowledge / history in the capital of this country, the capital of the world in 2022. In all caps, sad! ! Pathetic! ! Ridiculous! ! Number 3, the 14th Amendment. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdictions the equal protection of the laws. Comments. This amendment establishes that all citizens are entitled to equal protection of the laws. I mean, it does say, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process, so it could imply that also means more than just citizens. But, This provision was cited in Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954, ruling school segregation unconstitutional, angering racist Joe Biden. Okay, so Biden was born in 1942. He was 12 when Brown versus Board of Education happened. He was 12. I know that he's referencing, how Joe Biden was, part of the anti-busing movement of the 70s, but it would still take a bit longer for... But, Biden was 12. Quite simply, if others in jail can attend mosque, we should be able to attend church. Okay. Now this is interesting. This is the first time another religion is referenced. Namely, is he saying that all Muslims are getting special treatment? Is this happening? I really don't know, because this is the first time it's brought up. It's brought up out of nowhere. It is referenced again, but the details are very lax. Is another religious group getting preference? If they get to meet with an imam, we should be allowed to meet with a pastor. If they get to go to classrooms, college, and learn trades, we should be able to as well. So this part, if they get to go to classrooms, college, and learn trades, we should be able to as well. Is he saying that the prison is only allowing Muslims these rights? Seriously, is that what he is saying? If others get haircuts in the jail barbershop, we should not feel similar to our black brothers in the 1950s. In 1950s Montgomery being told these services aren't for you. Are these the Muslims getting haircuts? I think he mentioned that people who are vaccinated can get haircuts. But seriously, I'm legitimately confused. Oh, and of course, this guy is comparing being unvaccinated to being black. You can choose to be vaccinated, you can't choose to be black. Well, I guess you can choose not to vote for Joe Biden, if that counts. If others can see their family or lawyers in person, then we should... the wrong than should be then, dingus. We should be able to as well. If they get 5 hours of rec, they should get more, and we should get the same, if not more, because we are pre-trial detainees and not prisoners. Okay, so is the they in question prisoners rather than pre-trial detainees? I'm really not sure. Who are the they? We most definitely should not get 0 hours a day for weeks or only 2 or 3. Finally, if they have access to video calls, we should have access to video calls. Okay, so, the general idea is somewhat reasonable. Hey, prisoners, have rights too, I guess, but I'm still not sure exactly who the mysterious they are who are receiving certain privileges that he's being denied. This jail has gone further than segregation. They have denied us of essential rights entirely for over a year. The Founding Fathers only took the tyrannical abuse from the British so long. Fix it now, please. The Founding Fathers only took the tyrannical abuse from the British so long. Fix it now, please. I'm just thinking for a second. Hang on. I was going to chug a little. Delicious apple cider. I do have to say, looking at this now, I'm legitimately impressed that dude is such a such a victimhood mindset going that he's comparing himself, to the colonists being oppressed by the British and to the African Americans in the South being oppressed by Jim Crow laws. Now that's victimhood. I'm not looking to run away from this jail. I want it fixed for myself and others. Okay, finally. Fixed for myself and others. Okay, there's something. The Founding Fathers didn't run. They stayed, fought, and helped bring about relief and change to its citizens both immediately and for the future. Number 4. The Supreme Court said pretrial detainees shall enjoy freedom of speech and religion in both Pell v. Procunier and Cruz versus Beto. Number 5. The Supreme Court ruled COVID is not an excuse to avoid the Constitution in Roman Catholic Diocese of Brooklyn versus Cuomo. That includes all the amendments I just read along with the issues I've presented, and will present when I sue this city and jail in a future class action lawsuit I helped organize. Okay, wait. He says, I helped organize. That means he's already organized it, because that's past tense. But he will sue them. So did he already organize the lawsuit, and he's just waiting for the right moment to sue them? Please save this jail and city some money. Give me and the others less to sue about. Please save this jail and city some money. Give me and the others less to sue about. Please save this jail and city some money. Give me and the others less to sue about. One more time. Please save this jail and city some money. Give me and the others less to sue about. I have a harder time laughing at the sufferings of this sort of shit, but like, you're making it really hard not to laugh, my guy. Impossible not to laugh, really. Though the money will help, it won't make up for the tremendous damages we have suffered. But reading number 6, this court knows money cannot make up for this. I'm preaching to the choir. Are you supposed to use idioms in these types of legal filings? Number 6. Finally, you personally ruled on 2 similar cases last year, 2021, and the year before, that in both Roman Catholic Archbishop versus Bowser and Capitol Hill Baptist Church versus Bowser. In them, you are quoted as saying, quote, the loss of First Amendment freedoms for even minimal periods, or minimals in caps here, periods of time unquestionably constitutes irreparable injury, end quote. The time frames in question were weeks, not months, let alone over a year, as we have suffered, and perhaps even longer for others. All this while others enjoy their religious freedoms in the jail. Okay, no, seriously. Like, who are the others enjoying their religious freedoms in the jail? Like, is it just the Jan 6 detainees who are being denied? Like, it's implied that. But earlier he mentions that Muslims are being given special treatment. I'm legitimately confused. Imagine if anti-science Muriel Bowser had allowed mosques open but not churches. Okay. So are Muslims in prison or in the jail getting special treatment? Like, seriously, tell me, man. Imagine she said, only Democrats can go to church, all others have lost their constitutional rights indefinitely. I know you would have struck it down because you struck it down based off of way fewer radical situations. I know you would have struck it down because you struck it down based off of way fewer radical situations. Colorless green ideas sleep furiously. Here we have 58 and counting weeks, not 1 week. Others get these services, we don't. It was less mainstream that natural immunity worked better at the times you ruled in those cases. It was less mainstream that lockdowns and mask mandates combined were only 0.2% effective. 99.98% ineffective. As a reminder, he is misreading the study. The study was only the meta-analysis was only looking at whether or not lockdowns affected COVID mortality rates. It had nothing to do with mask mandates, nothing to do with reducing contagion levels, nothing to do with reducing case numbers, just mortality rates. The effects of lockdowns were not as mainstream or apparent to many. We suffered way more than the parties you gave relief to on just the subject of church. That is why relief must be granted in statements issued. You were quoting as saying, missing a chance to gather on Sunday is not a mere injury in terms of money, time, and energy, but instead a harm for which there can be no do-over and no redress. If that is how you felt over 1 missed Sunday, how do you feel about over 58 and counting Sundays? If you do not grant this relief, then, THAN, then I need to go back to elementary school to get a new understanding of basic math. Now, you got to go to elementary school and take a grammar class, my guy. Quote, 1 missed Sunday equals too many, but 58 and above is just right, end quote, is what the court would be proclaiming if it denies this motion. This is just on church alone. What of the other constitutional issues? I hate math. Please, make some sense of this equation. Rule in favor of my requests. Oi. Another similarity to these cases is how you realize there was no justification for denying relief to the applicants because it was clear the matter was not moot. The applicants remained under a constant threat that the area in question will be reclassified because the state regularly changes the classification of areas without prior notice. If that were to occur, the reclassification will almost certainly bar individuals in the affected area from attending services before judicial relief can be attained. You know, I didn't even notice I was reading a quote. I was just surprised that he was writing something coherent, like, oh no, wait, that was a quote. What great foresight you had. After all, DC has gone through multiple reclassifications since then. The same thought process would not only serve to protect Jan 6ers or the unvaccinated, but all in the DC jail. After all, similar to how you noted restaurants had unlimited outdoor dining and 50% or more capacity with indoor dining, you recognize the nonsense. Similarly, up to 50 people live in a pod whose open space and common area is the size of the chapel, if not smaller. Of the chapel. The size of a chapel, unless there's only one chapel in the world. Despite this, the jail has one service and only allows 10 people to attend if they are vaccinated and not January 6th defendants. Okay, there's only one chapel in the world. Saying something. So, they only allow vaccinated and hang on. January 6th attendance to the defendants to attend. At least I'm assuming he's not bullshitting. Vey. Should the cult members be so terrified of ending this total denial, they could at least be kind enough to move us into the realm of segregation and allow an actual pastor to come to our pod on Sunday mornings and preach there with us? No, that's not even a question. That just ends in a period. So, should the cult members be so terrified of ending this total denial, they could at least be kind enough to move us into the realm of segregation and allow an actual pastor to come into our pod on Sunday mornings and preach there with us. Though this would be tough as phones are next to the common area. Another idea is to have chapel in a giant space like the gym, capacity is over 500 and is empty on all day Sunday. Either way, something must be done. This jail holds 1,400 people. Only allowing 10 people of a certain group to benefit is not proper or legal. 2 final quotes I loved, both are very similar, citing Roman Catholic Diocese of Brooklyn v. Cuomo. Even in a pandemic, the Constitution cannot be put away and forgotten. Now, citing Roberts v. Nice of 6th Circuit in 2020, while the law may take periodic naps during a pandemic, we will not let it sleep through one. The DC jail has been sleeping through the law for decades. Like a troublesome child tells his rushing mother in the morning, yes, Mom, I'm up and getting ready for school, and then goes back to bed. So to be this jail doing the same to the courts when they are found in contempt in October. Wait. So to be this jail doing the same to the courts when they were found in contempt in October. The mother then leaves to go focus on her other priorities as the kid pops some sleeping pills and falls asleep even deeper than before. Do kids regularly have access to those types of sleeping pills? The jail also popped some sleeping pills to sleep through the law as courts moved along to focus on their other priorities shortly after investigating the jail in October. Consider me the school calling the father to let him know of the troublesome child's absences. We know what the authorities say on a kid who continually skips school. They can be taken away or face sanctions, such as summer school or failing. We also know what Congress and the Supreme Court say on the issues I presented. The court has the discretion like a father to discipline the troublesome child or jail. Just because it was published months ago is not a reason to avoid... just because it was punished months ago is not a reason to avoid punishing it again. It is still skipping the laws it wants to. It has not learned its lesson. It has gotten worse. Now that part legitimately read like something Dave Sim would write, only, as I said before, worse grammar. Last time the jail was told they would lose 400 inmates for sleeping through the law, the equivalent of a smaller allowance given. Their metaphorical mother, Muriel Bowser, argued the punishment was too severe. They then lost less than 200 inmates. They haven't shaped up. They need more harsh punishments. They need reforms. They need to be taught how to get their grades up, how to follow the law. The bad habits or people must be terminated and replaced with healthy ones. The best parents don't just punish their children. Or don't just punish when their children fail. They offer solutions to help them succeed. Keep in mind, though, this jail has been constitutionally abusing inmates, and especially us Jan 6ers, for a long time. This is not some innocent child. If this jail were a person, it would be a deviant psychopath. I'll be honest, I think most jails would qualify for that. Bring punishments down upon it while offering it help to behave normally as the law requires in the future. The law has been asleep in the D.C. jail for decades. I actually do have to know, like, how does he know it's been for decades? Like, he's only been there for about a year or so, I guess. I don't know exactly how long he's been there off the top of my head. But no, seriously, how does he know it's been decades? Oh. It is time Lady Liberty woke it up with a righteous beatdown using the scales of justice as a weapon. This court is the only one holding Lady Liberty back. Let the beatdown commence. You know, I'm just imagine like, I don't know, Statue of Liberty comes to life and she just like bashes things with with the scale of justice. What do you think? This court is the only... Oh, sorry. I've got front row tickets, and I've got stale popcorn from the commissary. This guy's got a really romantic notion of what justice is like. If this court doesn't allow the legal beatdown now, the jail and city will suffer an even worse beatdown from us in the future, as every day without our rights is more money we will be taking from this jail and this city. Help us, and at the same time help the city and the jail. Passing my requests for relief is a great, in all caps, investment for all parties. I mean, you know, the seemingly random use of just all caps and exclamation marks. This guy really does have Trump's style of writing, or tweeting rather, only much longer, I guess. Even down to the need to feel perpetually victimized, aggrieved, and blame others for everything. Section 3.1. Regarding my historical arguments or correlations of my treatment to the black population of Montgomery, Alabama in the 50s. In the event the court or government subtly or outwardly agrees with another often heard dismissive argument that, quote, I'm white and should not or have no right to relate my suffering to MLK or others in the black community of that era, end quote. I'm not sure who he's quoting. This again is, I should say, end quote, then comma. This again is history repeating itself. The Democrats did the same to the black population in 50s Montgomery. For many years, Democrats argued black people were not smart enough, human enough, or citizen enough to vote. They argued they should have no say on voting and tried to silence them or scare them. Race does not matter. Martin Luther King Jr. was a man just as I am. I'm tired of the oppression of his people. Wait, no. Okay, I'm tired of the oppression of his people. Oh, no, sorry. Martin Luther King Jr. was a man, just as I am, comma, tired of the oppression of his people and hoping for better days. I, unlike Martin Luther King, have not had a dream of the day we are all treated equally. Oh, I, unlike MLK, have not had a dream of the day we are all treated equally. Well, I mean, he said earlier that discrimination ended with Brown v. Board of Education. However, I have daydreamed often of what it would be like to hear I have my First Amendment rights back. I've daydreamed of being both in a political prison church and in civilian church, praying and singing with my brothers and sisters of many different backgrounds and races. I've daydreamed of what it would be like to go to mock trial classes in political prison with the other inmates, Jan 6ers or not, maybe even seeing the friends I made in Northwest 3 or 2 South. I've daydreamed of what I would ask and discuss with a pastor, both at the political prison and outside it. You know, considering this guy was like earlier talking about it, like, yeah, we took some rad selfies. We are awesome. We love America. Also, it was all a setup and it was Antifa and BLM. You know, this guy is, but no, he also has to act like just the ultimate victim. Like, oh, I'm locked in a political prison. You know, all he did was take part in a literal attempt to, what's the word? You know, to try to overturn the election results. But of course, the best part, Trump could have pardoned him if he wanted to. I mean, Trump had 2 weeks to pardon he could have pardoned the entirety of January 6 rioters. What were the Dems going to do? Impeach him a third time? But no. Because that's the thing. Trump doesn't give a fuck about them. He doesn't give a, like, if you like Trump, I doubt he gives a fuck about you. I mean, like, even look at Rudy Giuliani. Trump was willing to throw his own lawyer under the bus. If he's willing to throw his own lawyer under the bus, he will throw you under the bus, just saying. Let's see. I've daydreamed of the excitement I would feel upon hearing I too could get a haircut and shave without having to pay $15 to apply a cream and then proceed to have it burn and rip off, leaving red marks and blisters everywhere. I mean, even back to my friend who's currently in jail, I mentioned earlier. Yeah, he's got to pay money for, like, everything, and he pays out the fucking ass. And I've even had to give him like a little bit of. I've even had to give him some supplies myself. Like he said that they only gave him just a single jumpsuit, so I actually had to, go to the dollar store, get some underwear and socks and undershirts to give to him because they really gave him nothing. Well, next to nothing. I've daydreamed about being treated as at least the same as a death row inmate, and perhaps even better, especially in terms of being let out of my cell. I've daydreamed, of not having to write nearly everything on a rusty metal bed next to a cold stone wall and instead be allowed to the common area to write on a desk. I've dreamed of being able to see my family both as a political prisoner and a civilian. I've daydreamed of not losing my grandmother and grandfather since being locked in this political prison. Okay, so, I mean, were these is this the same grandma who died from the government in COVID earlier? I've even daydreamed of meeting more fake news journalists face to face to give them a chance to produce the actual story I present to them and not twist it, and of course to apply a name to a face so it makes it easier to pray for such people. Hey, I mean, I can put your name and face on the screen right now. Bloop. And you know what? Just because, editor.
We must not be misled by left-wing incompetent news media that day after day feed us a diet of fantasy telling us we are bigots, racist, and hate-mongers to oppose the destruction of the Constitution and our nation. A left-wing monster has risen up in this nation. It has invaded the government. It has invaded the news media. It has invaded the leadership of many of our churches. It has invaded every phase and aspect of the life of freedom-loving Americans. It consists of many and various powerful interests, but it has combined into one massive drive and is held together by the cohesive power of the emotion, setting forth civil rights as supreme to all. But in reality, it is a drive to destroy the rights of private property, to destroy the freedom and liberty of you and me. And my friends, where there are no property rights, there are no human rights. Red China and Soviet Russia are prime examples.
Thank you. Finally, I've daydreamed of us having video calls like the other inmates have, so myself and others from faraway states like California, Colorado, Florida, etc. can see their families for the first time in over a year. Racism and discrimination can be used to hurt anyone. The court next time it sees me can feel free to take notice of the scars on the left side of my face and beneath my eye. They are from concrete pebbles being scraped into my head and that were struck in my head. They are from concrete pebbles being scraped into my head and that were struck in my head. They were the results of actual racism, not some fake Jussie Smollett race. He misspelled it's Jussie, not Jesse, Jussie. Jussie Smollett racism. You know, like, it does kind of interest me how, hang on. There's always this fixation on false flags. I mean, yeah, what Jussie Smollett did was pretty fucked up. But like even earlier, it was like, oh, actually, it was a BLM and Antifa false flag. I'm innocent, I'm a victim. And like, I think this fixation on false flags is just part of the perpetual victimhood mindset that these schmucks are in. 1 week before graduation from high school, I was jumped because of my race and robbed. 8 or so individuals, who happened to be black, thought I had money because I went to, quote, a rich white school, end quote, and demanded I give them my backpack. I told them I just left work and it only had my work clothes in it. They demanded it. I said no. They then proceeded to jump me while attacking my race verbally. Right before being knocked out on the concrete, seeing and hearing a black woman that potentially knew them come out towards me screaming, "Stop, you're going to kill him." And one of the men punched her in the face and told her to get the F away. That was the last thing I remember. I was found on the side of the road at 2 or 3 in the morning by a Latino male and black male who brought me to the hospital. Takeaways from this are, as stated, racism and discrimination can happen to anyone. There are bad people and there are good people in every group of race and arbitrary classification. There are decent Democrats and decent Trump supporters. There are also bad. Wait, there are decent Democrats and decent Trump supporters. There are also bad. There are decent Democrats, comma, and decent Trump supporters, comma. There are also bad. There are decent Democrats, comma, and decent Trump supporters, comma. There are also bad. There are decent white people and decent black people. There are also bad. There are also bad. Okay, put that on a t-shirt. Every group has good and bad. There are also bad. There are also bad. Ain't that a word or a fragment? I mean, assuming he's correct assuming he's telling the truth here, it sucks that he went through that. I don't really see how it's relevant to his time in jail. I've suffered plenty more verbal attacks based on my race and sex throughout the years, but again, it's not as bad overall compared to my black brothers and sisters in 1950s Montgomery. However, it is getting worse for males, white males, Trump supporters, the unvaccinated, and Jan 6ers as a whole. I'm kind of remembering that Ditto Head article I read where, like, from 1994. Yeah, 1994 was like those same grievances. The white guys were like, oh, it's the sexual minorities and the blacks who are pushing us around. Like, it's always the exact same grievances. This need to feel as if other racial or ethnic groups or sexual groups are getting benefits at your expense. I don't want us to become like the fools in South Africa. To do that, we must protect the rights of all men equally. We must deter discrimination. We must punish severely those who purposely and knowingly practice and employ discrimination, especially when they show they love doing it. This leads me again to one of my major requests. Granting the relief I've asked for would be a victory, but more must be done. We must punish the criminal perpetrators. Judge, carjackings in this quote-unquote mostly peaceful city are off the charts. Mostly peaceful. Yeah, you know what? Then again, this is coming from a guy who engaged in legitimate political discourse. Yeah, I almost forgot about that. Like, the RNC just gone so far off the rails, they literally refer to the Jan 6 riots as legitimate political discourse. I'm surprised the Dems haven't capitalized on that. Just be like, oh, hey, you want to go? Hey, you and me, yeah, you. Let's go outside. Let's engage in some legitimate political discourse. And you see, that's the thing, is that the right wing has just such a hard-on for this need to feel aggrieved and victimized that when CNN does a crappy headline, they'll just all run with it because they have this almost, this much more monolithic mindset. They need to scan for something really stupid the media did, blow it well out of proportion, and act like it's everything the media is saying, or everything the monolithic media is saying all the time. But when the literal Republican National Committee chairwoman refers to the January 6th insurrection as legitimate political discourse, barely anything. You can get away with it, just about anything in the media sphere on the right. I imagine if the DOJ got tough on actual criminals and prosecuted them without handing off feel free do it again plea deals or dropping the charges, you would punish them. Okay, this would be the purview of the municipal DC authority, not the feds. I guess unless the feds were, what's the word? Yeah, I guess unless the feds were in charge of, or I guess unless they were jacking a federal vehicle. Imagine before you sit a carjacker who stole a vehicle from someone based off an arbitrary classification or their race and kept the stolen car for 13 months. Oh, sorry. Imagine before you should be sat, not sit. Imagine before you sat a carjacker who stole a vehicle from someone based off an arbitrary classification or their race and kept their stolen car for 13 months. I'm willing to bet you would do something about it. I doubt you would just say, hey there, friend, could you please give that car back you stole from the victim based off his race or arbitrary classification. I'm willing to bet you'd say more than, how dare you give that car back and go free with no penalty. Is this guy just noticing that white-collar crimes tend to get a lot more lenient sentences than blue-collar crimes? Like, this legitimately reads kind of like Dave Sim realizing that white-collar crimes tend to get off easy. Well, relative to blue-collar crimes. To the contrary, they would face fines, jail time, a record, restitution, perhaps even parole afterwards. After all, think of the domino effect that lost car would have taken on its owner that year. Loss of income, opportunities, visiting family, getting time away from city life, the ability to go to the barber, to school, not to mention the potential mental, physical, and emotional damages caused to the victim. Simply ordering the car to be given back would insult the victim, reward the oppressor or criminal, not to mention welcome future occurrences. And, just think about all the... No, you see, he wasn't stealing the car. He was just taking some selfies next to it. And, oh my God, why are you victimizing me? Now I want you to imagine a giant local criminal syndicate that has been abusing thousands of people for decades is before you. Just months ago, they were found to have lied to the court and covered up a crime that ended up hurting a cancer patient, which led to an investigation that found they were forcing at least 400 people to live in subpar conditions and suffering varying levels of abuse, all with reports that they ran to cover up the other conditions. I attest they did cover up our conditions. Now, I want you to imagine this criminal syndicate has new charges. They stole at least 50 people's cars since at least 13 months ago, and stole them based off of race or arbitrary classifications of the victims. I'm willing to bet they would not just be told to give the cars back or verbally scolded. After all, such a response would make objective... You gotta love, these far-right wingnuts and their fixation with the word objective. And I think it's because they take this idea of, those liberals, they think everything is subjective. You see, we are the prime authorities on objective reality. Okay. They would make objective onlookers wonder, why is this judge seemingly protecting this large criminal syndicate and doing nothing to help the victims? Which, of course, leads down some potential dark answers. Now, Your Honor, he doesn't even capitalize the YH, I don't have to tell you missing church alone is worse than losing a car. After all, you are quoted as saying, missing a chance to gather on Sunday is not a mere injury in terms of money, time, and energy, all of which go into the purchasing of a car, but instead a harm for which there can be no do-over and no redress. I once had my car stolen and totaled in 2016 by an illegal immigrant from Pakistan. They had no money, despite that they had free housing, unemployment, and food stamps. Okay, wait a second. Seriously, how did they get that housing, unemployment, and food stamps? You do have to go through a long application process to get those. I've actually tried to, during COVID, I actually helped some of my friends in Maryland slog through the annoying food stamp application process. And Maryland is quite literally one of the bluest states out there. Even in one of the bluest states out there, it was a Kafkaesque hellscape. So I rode my motorcycle through the freezing winter for months. Now we Jan Sixers didn't just lose church. We don't have any of the triple C's or HR double V's. All of this for up to 13 months and counting, while others are getting those services. This is way worse than a criminal syndicate stealing 50 people's car based off of... I hate it when he says based off of arbitrary classifications for over a year. Yet here we are, still not given back our constitutional rights that have been illegally stolen from us. Your Honor, would you punish a criminal syndicate who stole 50 cars for over 1 year based off of race or arbitrary... It should be or arbitrary classifications. Would you punish a constitutional abusing jail that did worse than that? Will you? Your response will show if justice truly is for all, and if justice is blind in this courtroom. You have the discretion to rule on this matter. You can and should grant relief and hold the criminals in contempt. Excuse me. I might be misremembering, and I am no legal expert, but I do believe that if the state, if a civilian inflicts damage upon the state, it's a criminal thing. If the state inflicts damage upon a civilian, it's generally a civil case. Does this guy want, this guy seems to want criminal law for what would be a civil case. Now, whether or not you think that's fair or not is irrelevant. I'm just trying to remember exactly how the law works off the top of my head. Section 3-2. Almost done. Now, I understand after looking at how Hillary Clinton planned an insurrection in 2016 as seen in the Durham reports, Russia hoax. Okay, you know what? It's not really a true Trump-era wingnut apologia without a reference to Hillary Clinton. Let's just, let me get my automaton ready. Okay, let me just, And that was Facts 5. I'm playing an automaton celebratory song. I don't want to work. I just want to bang on my drum all day. I don't want to play. I just want to bang on my drum all day. Ah. All right. How she lied about her emails, how she lied about Benghazi, how she sent men to intimidate Monica Lewinsky, hashtag not with her, how the FBI refused to do anything with Hunter Biden's Biden''s laptop, Nancy Pelosi's stock market schemes. Okay, so I just have to comment on the stock market thing. Like, what Pelosi's doing in the stock market, it's unethical, but it's not illegal because, you know, members of Congress get special immunities regarding being allowed to trade on what is effectively inside information, aka stuff they hear about in Congress. Nancy Pelosi's business dealings, Cuomo killing off thousands of senior citizens, General Milley's offering to keep China in the loop secretly for what our president was doing, Joe Biden and Barack Obama materially supporting terrorist organizations and regime like the Taliban in Iran, FBI Director James Comey's lies, Kamala Harris and other Democrats funding insurrectionists, BLM and Antifa, bail funds, Merrimack Garland's many lies or crimes and plenty of other high crimes that in this city's capital C, ITIES, institutions, justice is neither blind nor for all. There is Democrat and elitist privilege. You know, you gotta love how this is a Trumpist screed, because he basically just, when he's on trial, he literally just goes into a bunch of whataboutisms of completely unrelated cases. My personal favorite is the Benghazi thing, after Hillary literally went through 12 hours of questioning from Republicans who have wanted her head ever since I was a kid, and she didn't crack. Trump refuses to testify in Congress, and he's just... And I guess, oh no, he's not a whiner baby, he's an alpha male. Yeah, no. Say whatever you will about Hillary. She is fucking rock solid. Trump is just an immature brat, but I guess a lot of his supporters are immature brats too. Because I guess throwing a hissy fit on Twitter is a sign of alpha masculinity. Wow. Still, I can't help but ask and challenge you to stand against what is normal in this... Here we go. In this swamp city, I can't help but beg you to follow and defend the Constitution that you took an oath to follow and protect. I can't help but begging you to punish the criminals who are illegally hunting others and myself with no remorse. Wait, criminals hunting him? As mentioned, I recommend each step of the grievance process have a verification method set in place. This could include an inmate signature or a recording of the inmate receiving his grievance document with the grievance document number being read to him as it is handed off. This will eliminate the jail from being able to claim they handed it to us or that they responded when they have not. This will eliminate the jail. No, this will prevent the jail. Additionally, it should be investigated if the jail can delete electronic versions of our grievances and whether they have done so to paper copies. Speaking from experience, auditing nearly all the Walmarts in the Northeast in 2016, a third-party auditor is the best way to keep corruption out. Well, at least we know a little bit more about him now. When Walmart employees did the internal audits, they were motivated to lie. A great audit report would produce bonuses for the quarter to the employees of that department and or store, along with favoritism. Wait, should be and or store with favoritism and promotions. A bad result would bring about a bad reputation and potentially the words, "You're fired, Trump voice." Literally, open parenthesis, Trump voice, close parenthesis. Elections should not be internally audited, nor the jail possibly has grievance process. It protects corruptions. Of course, he just brings up elections. It was never mentioned before, but he just felt the need to add that in. God. Another reform idea is that the marshals should conduct private meetings with jail staff to investigate if they know whether the grievance process has been destroyed or purposely ignored by others. But if you want the best results, they must be offered the ability to remain anonymous. Some of the employees are retaliatory. And a lot of employees are from a third world country on a work visa. They fear if they are fired, they will be sent back to their home country. This makes them a perfect group of people to listen to all orders, no matter how abusive. Is he referring to the employees of a jail or a Walmart? On 2/22/22, I received 4 grievances back. Nearly all are relevant to these issues. In court, I will be motioning to submit them as exhibits to support my claims. They will have very brief further descriptions and examples of the issues. They not only further show the grievance process is broken, but they also relate to the issues I presented months ago, as well as how the jail is scrambling to cover itself as best as it can now that it is about to be called out. Finally, since I am ending with requests to hold the criminals accountable and requests for ways to solve these issues to the benefit of all/reforms, I'd like to push 3 final case laws to be in the minds of the court as it prepares to make its decision. Its decision on what will be done. Number 1, government officials do not enjoy qualified immunity from civil damages if their conduct violates clearly established constitutional or statutory rights of which a reasonable person would have known. He cites the case right there, but again, this guy wants criminal punishment, not civil litigation. Comments. Though this is not a civil court, these are civil rights issues, the denial of which was criminal. Not only are these laws known by nearly all competent people, but they are constantly warned to stop the abuse by others like myself, lawyers, judges, and even Congress members. Should they have been ignorant to the law, as this court has said, that is no excuse. However, that is not the case here. Number 2, qualified immunity will not protect the plainly incompetent or those who knowingly violate the law. Comments, see previous comments. Number 3, although there is no pure respondent superior liability under subsection 1983, a supervisor is liable for the acts of his subordinates, quote, if a supervisor participated in, directed, or ignored the violations and failed to prevent them. Comments. Our complaints have gone all the way to the top. We have conducted sit-ins and spoken to lieutenant captains, majors, corporals, directors, and wardens. They know our plight. All do. They do worse than ignore. They continue to order such harsh unconstitutional treatments. They are criminal. The jail has shown through the grievance process that they do not care about the inmates, the law, or the courts. The PLRA is not only to protect inmates, but to protect the courts from having to rule on every single issue from an inmate. Since the grievance process is non-existent, the court has jurisdiction to rule on all violations and complaints from prisoners. They have been warned by many. Me, other inmates, our families, jail, staff, lawyers, media, judges, and Congress members. Wait a second, I thought the media was fake news. Do not be lenient with them. They made your job tougher and many people's lives miserable as they ignored the laws and the Constitution. Please punish the criminal syndicate. Conclusion. I, Brandon Fellows, respectfully ask the judge to grant my relief and stop the unconstitutional abuse towards myself and all January 6th defendants in the D.C. Correctional Facility, as well as many others being abused unconstitutionally as well as in the jail. One primary goal I have is to receive the triple C's and HRVs we require. Additionally, I implore you to help us fix and enforce the jail apostrophe grievance process, as many key elements in the chain have broken down. I also request that constitutional liberties such as church, clergy, classrooms, haircuts, recreations, visitations, and video calls be made available to us, just as they are available to every American citizen. Separately, papers, stamps, pens, and other office supplies should be provided to us. These are what everyone else gets aside from we January 6th defendants in the pod. Even the vaccinated defendants do not get these services except for haircuts. Furthermore, on multiple instances within this motion, I compare the plight of the January 6th defendants to those of the American Civil Rights Movement of the 60s. He was comparing them to the black community in the 1950s, not the 60s. I challenge you, let justice be done, rule in favor of these motions, and punish the criminal perpetrators. Stand against the grain of this corrupt city and its corrupt institutions. Stand against the historical trends, however hard they may be, and despite trouble it may bring. If you fail to act in a positive way on these motions, as mentioned earlier, you will have your answer on what judge you would have been in 1950s Montgomery, Alabama. So wait, he just says 1960s at the start of the paragraph, 1950s at the bottom. The guy cannot get his decade straight. In many ways, progress has been made for the black people of this country. Much still must be done. Wait a second, no, I thought discrimination ended after Brown versus Board of Education. However, we can look back and read what judges made the right decisions in Brown versus the Board of Education. We can look back and see the people who fought for the constitutional rights of the black population in America. We can also see who was silent and who helped cause their oppression. Do not choose what is easy today in exchange for an eternity of shame. That is relevant spiritually as well. Do not choose sin over God. I'm far from politically correct, but I really do hope you do what is right. Respectfully, Brandon Fellows, pro se. God, it's nearly 3 hours in, and I finally finished this monstrosity. Amusingly, assuming he's correct about the abuses of the prison or the jail, I would say he at least has something of a point, but the fact of the matter is that Brandon is clearly just so head shoved up his ass regarding his need to feel aggrieved and victimized that he basically spent the bulk of that comparing himself to some of the most famous victims of American history. Honestly, this entire thing could have probably been much shorter and probably taken me much less time to read if he didn't just go spend pages and pages crying and fetching and moaning about how, he and his friends who had January 6th are awesome, but also January 6th was actually run by Democrats in BLM, but also it wasn't really that bad, but also it was done by the Democrats. You see, it's this lovely cognitive dissonance. On the one hand, it wasn't that bad. On the other hand, on the one hand, it wasn't that bad. On the other hand, it was all caused by the Democrats anyway. And, as I said before, and I'll say it again, everybody deserves civil rights, even scoundrels and scum. And if Brandon's, rights are being abridged and violated as he did a rather poor job of laying out, well, I do think he should get those same rights. But honestly, Brandon, I doubt you're ever going to listen to this. But just stop and think. You don't have to make yourself the victim of absolutely everything. It's just being the victim of an incompetent prison system isn't enough. No, he has to be a political victim, a religious victim. He has to be a racial victim. He has to be the victim of every which way and form, not just the victim of an incompetent and or malicious penal system that, truth be told, has fucked over a lot of Americans.
Hello once again, my darling listeners. I spent the past forever reading that direct, and I wrote this part up afterwards when I was in a better state of mind. Without further delay, let's get into my closing remarks. I've read through this document at least 3 or 4 times. Each time I read it, I found it draining on my psyche, and yet I just could not stop reading it. After some careful consideration, I have come down to the objective and factual conclusion that Brandon's horrific shit show is the end result of this Trumpist Tillman cycle on one's mind. Assuming he's correct, and I am assuming he's correct and not just bullshitting us, because it is kind of hard to tell with this guy. So assuming he is correct about the way the jail is treating him, he certainly has plenty of valid complaints. He should be entitled to a decent grievance procedure, one that actually allows him to file stuff. He should be allowed various religious freedoms and basic hygienes and visitation rights and whatnot. And yet, his mind is just so completely and utterly warped by the Tillman cycle that he absolutely must view the entirety of his existence and oppression through the lens of himself and his friends being oppressed, victimized, and excluded by a nebulous left-wing establishment. You see, it's not enough that he's being denied church services, but rather he's being denied those services while Muslims are getting their religious rights, somehow at his expense. It's not enough that his lawyers were unable to get him what he wanted, but rather they were part of the left-wing conspiracy too. They were the leftists, as he called them, who were even in on it. Even things that were not directly affecting him, he had to phrase it in a way that made him feel victimized and oppressed. Joe Biden wasn't trying to rectify the wrongs of decades of denying black farmers federal aid. No. He was deliberately trying to exclude white people from receiving aid. Of course, we can't have the Tillman cycle without a fair share of popular elitism. As a reminder, popular elitism is the idea that someone holds where they see the desire to conform to a set of standards they deem normal and standard to be worthy of privilege and special treatment. We can see this during the parts where he tries to talk about being questioned about January 6th. He routinely deflects, and in one instance trying to direct the people questioning him to an alleged bomber who was already locked up in the jail. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. What did he expect them to do? Like, even if that guy who, I couldn't find him anywhere online, but like, even if that guy was real and he did all that, they caught him. Like, I'm not being facetious when I say I legitimately want to know what he expected them to do. Reminder, the guy who he was trying to point to was already caught and already in jail. But of course, when he, or I should say rather, in the very few handful of instances he talks about what he actually did, he keeps saying, oh, I didn't actually do anything bad. I was just having a tour, and also the people who were with me were awesome. He completely ignored, for example, the folks who were chanting, hang Mike Pence. He was completely ignoring the folks who brought guns, who brought weapons, and attacked police officers. So much for Back the Blue, I guess. Probably my favorite part of his whole left-wing establishment thing, where he talks about how powerful and crafty the Dems are. He talks about how the Dems have gotten even more powerful and even craftier since the 1950s. And like, come on. Alright, the GOP, they've gerrymandered a bunch of states to shit. You know, like Ohio and Texas and Florida. They have an advantage in the Senate and an advantage in the Electoral College. But no, that goes against this Neo-Tillmanite pigeonhole that the man uses. So the Dems have to be even more powerful than he could imagine. And truth be told, I really don't think he'll ever feel power, because the bulk of his identity is needing to feel excluded from power. In fact, it's easy to forget, but after the 2016 election, the Republicans had control of the House of Representatives, the U.S. Senate, the presidency, the Supreme Court for at least a generation, and they had control of almost enough states to call a constitutional convention. The only things that they did not have were a veto-proof majority, a filibuster-proof majority, and, well, enough states to literally call a constitutional convention. You'd assume they'd be happy and feel like winners, and sometimes they'd talk about how, oh yeah, we're winning too much. You know, we're winning so much we're getting tired of winning, that sort of thing. But at the same time, what did they do? Well, they crafted a new establishment to be excluded from, the deep state, a clandestine and well-organized network of bureaucrats who hold the real power in American politics. And I'll be real with y'alls, that is some Dragon Ball Z level bullshit, okay? It's like, oh yes, you defeated State, but the real challenge is State's older brother, Deep State. We've never mentioned Deep State before, but he's actually been the bad guy all along and the guy you gotta train for. Like, how do you deal with, how do you handle this sort of thing, this sort of mindset? How? Well, I don't know. There's a lot of things I don't know, and a lot of things I'll never know. Like, heck, why didn't Trump pardon the January 6th defendants? The Democrats already impeached him. What were they going to do? Impeach him again? I mean, think about it. You had January 6th, 2 more weeks until Trump was out of office. If he wanted to, he could have pardoned all of them. But he didn't. Of course, Brandon never brings this up. And I guess that's one of the other things I'll never know. Truth be told, even though there's a lot of things I'll never know, I do want to try to understand them. And I want to thank all of you who are taking this journey of understanding with me. If you've made it this far, then you are awesome, and those are absolutely the facts.